Hello survivors and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is a very special bonus episode for two reasons. First of all, if I haven't changed my mind, this should be releasing on the 4th anniversary of First Aid Spray. That's the plan anyway. So yay, happy 4 years to us. It's also very special because for the first time ever we are all recording in person.
Except for Jordan.
Except for Jordan, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
We missed you, Jordan.
You know. Squirrels don't get podcasts.
Yeah, we are convinced Jordan's either A, a squirrel, B, a bot, or C, Skynet. Could be all.
Yes,
Could be
all of the above. So, I have written some intros, so we're going to do at least that part.
Yeah,
The intro.
That's what we do.
Yeah, that is that, and then from there it becomes chaos. So, so the panelists so synonymous with First Aid Spray that if someone were to remake or reboot the podcast, he'd play the role of himself. I mean, who better? It's Five Up and Steve Allen's.
Okay. Yes. Hello, everybody.
The man, the myth, the massive delight of watching people freak out at indie horror games from Steamforged Games at Sherwin Matthews.
That's right.
First Aid Spray's first ever guest panellist, who in the last 3.5 years has been found theorising connections between Umbrella and Wayland and or Yutani. It's James, aka Moist Outlet.
Hello.
And coming from the southern tip of the country to the West Midlands, here comes that initialism, knackering drive back. It's Kelsey, aka KDB.
Yes, that's why I'm brought to you by Monster today.
So yeah, there is the format for this show is basically a little while ago we put something out on social media looking for questions to be answered. So this is a Q&A with questions asked by Patreon supporters and Twitter followers and the like. We couldn't necessarily use everything. We've grabbed a bunch of stuff. We'll see what we get through. This is going to be chaos, almost certainly. We're so used to recording online that it's not going to work in person. We can guarantee that. So nevertheless, I guess I'll just launch into it when I can find them. Where's that?
Everyone talk. Feel space.
You're going to go this side. But yeah, it's pretty awesome to be together in the same space with you all. Everybody's real, I can confirm.
And
Jordan,
we can confirm about Jordan.
Yeah.
Some of us are taller or shorter than we expected.
We'll leave it to the audience to figure out.
Why don't you look at me, Sherwin?
Because you're opposite. I have nowhere else to look. I mean, I could look at Jordan's empty chair, which is exactly what I'm doing.
Longingly.
Yeah, not longingly as much as just accusingly. Where are you, Jordan?
I mean, if Jordan was really a squirrel, we wouldn't be able to see him on that chair.
I'd like to think that Jordan was real. He'd be hiding inside this vase. Literally just
Pops up every now and then.
yeah.
So the first question comes from Choji, good friend of the show. Nice, kind of easy one to start off with. We touched on this a little bit, but it's what's your favourite Resident Evil game? And if there was one thing you could change from it, what would it be? We did get a similar question from somebody else who basically said, what would you change about every Resident Evil game? That's quite a long question.
That's a podcast. That's a series
exactly, that's a whole podcast by itself.
That's a series of podcasts.
So appreciated, but let's keep it a little more simple. So yes, what's your favourite Resident Evil game? What would you change about it? Kelsey, do you want to start with you and go around?
Yeah, let's start with me. Less time for me to think about it.
Yes.
My
you go.
My favourite game is the original RE2. I mean, that's just, I don't even have to think about that. And one day we're going to talk about that more in depth, which is going to be, I don't know how we're going to do that, but it will happen. So what would I change about it? Mm-hmm. I would change... God. I did think about this prior, but now I would change...
Great stuff. Steve, what's your favourite Resident Evil change?
Well, oddly enough, mine is also the original Resident Evil 2. Surprising nobody. The thing I would change is...
And I would change...
The colour of Leon's socks and his shoes, because they don't blend with that outfit at all.
Do we ever canonically see Leon's socks?
Yeah, actually, we have.
Leon's canonical socks is
Cop
great
out
name for a band.
answer, but I actually do
It's
like
a new sock birch. Let's go.
his newer outfit more. I know it's not much, but there's some sci-fi pads. I would take the aesthetic of the original and throw it away and throw in the new one. Now I'm getting upset on the internet. There we go.
No, I mean, I think I agree because we just did something for First Aid Spray that isn't out yet, and that exact point came up from me. So I think I'm just in complete agreement because I remember the first time I saw it, I was just like, this is this weird, kind of supposed to be like a SWAT style thing, but it's not. It's more like a parachutist jumpsuit.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It doesn't really make much sense. It's nice colour,
Right.
which kind of looks good in the game, but yeah,
It's the
outfit
most
itself
sci-fi looking outfit of the protagonists
Yeah.
ever. I mean, it's cool, but it doesn't fit. Whereas the remake 2-1 fits.
Yeah,
It's just a SWAT uniform.
agreed.
So making it a bit more boring.
Sherwin, favourite Resident Evil game and thing you would change about it?
So, I mean, the obvious answer I have to say is Gaiden. Because that's what everyone is expecting from me. But in all seriousness, you can't change the masterpiece that is Gaiden, so that's a bad answer.
Correct.
I think I'll go for... Do you know, Remake, I think, is the one for me. I do just love that game. What would I change about it? Two things if I can. The first one is I'd have better endings. It's the only downfall of that game is that the endings just feel a bit lackluster. As in there's not enough variety in terms of what actually happens at the end.
They leave or they don't.
Yeah, well that means you lost.
Well, not necessarily. It just means that Jill's dead, Chris is alive.
So I'd mix around those a little bit and expand those, make them feel a bit better. More hints of what's yet to come. Bear in mind they made this game, they know what's yet to come. The other thing I might do is put in a randomizer, so that way the members of stars that you find is different on each playthrough. So therefore, it's not always Richard who's poisoned by yawn. It's not always Rebecca you find hiding away from hunters and things. Just mix it around a bit, make it feel so there's more to when you go back and play it. There's more replayability. I think that's really where I'm coming from.
But would you change anyone's outfits? Is what we're asking here. The important stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
Screw that gameplay, exciting randomizer
If
mechanic.
you want to drill into that, I'll change some of the outfits you can unlock. Rebecca's cowgirl outfit is like the enemy of fun. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
What about Chris's gangster outfit with the red shirt and the...
No, I like that. It looks like he's just about to go snowboarding or something.
Yeah.
I like that. It's like
Finally, someone else sees the light.
Chris got called back from his holiday and literally just had to he's literally walking around like it's supposed to be my day off. That would give him a whole new element of character that I don't think Chris Redfield is ready for because it would make him not be bland and forgettable.
Yes.
On that bombshell, James, favourite Resident Evil game, what would you change about it?
Changes every week.
Yeah.
I think this week it's Resident Evil Village. I mean, they didn't ask why, but I just love how it ties a lot of the older games in. But that's why it changes all the time, because a lot of the other games can be tied in so easily. Like with Village and Resident Evil 7, with how they've done kind of origin stuff, but not really touched canon too much. The thing I would change about it is Chris Redfield. What could they do? Make it a better story. Don't half-ass it like they did in Village. Like there's literally no reason why. If you took Chris
Conveniently
out,
doesn't tell Ethan things.
right? Also, gonna go with marketing beforehand. Don't try and hoodwink your viewers and your consumers by trying to make it out that Chris is a villain when he really wasn't. Like, and you put it on the cover. We discussed this yesterday. Like, it never made any sense. He didn't add anything other than Jeff Shine's great portrayal of him and the fact, like, as a person, I liked Chris. Like, his story arc and why he was there was really dumb.
Yes.
So they should have just, fixed
Agreed. Mine is also Resident Evil 2 Classic.
What?
I know.
Who knew?
My outfit change is unlockable Elsa Walker in the original, obviously. My non-outfit change would be... There's two things, and they're both kind of stupid. One is the randomizer from N64 should have been in it, full stop.
Yes.
Right. Put that in the PS1 version so everybody has better access to it.
Yeah.
And also, David Ford should have a face. That's my one. I want to know what he looks like. There you go.
Oh, and modern ports for everything, please.
Yeah, that's the real thing.
Oh, and also a B-Files mode that is more its own thing.
Yeah, why not? Separate it even more. Absolutely. Okay, the next question comes from our good friend Ferdinand. I'm going to read it verbatim, but we're going to have to tweak it slightly. Question for you all. I'm a Resident Evil collector. I've got 130 different editions of games, every board game expansion, almost all English dubbed comics, most manga in all language possibly, a few collector's chests, all novels, and the movies. Yes, also the movies. There's a lot more to buy. I would like to know your collection. It'd be nice to show them. Keep up the good work. P.S. Little Eva is mutating into a bigger Eva. I've got to buy new First Aid Spray merch for her. So I'm going to workshop that into what is your prized Resident Evil collector's item or piece of merchandise.
And also shout out to Eva.
Also absolutely.
Hey Eva.
Yeah.
Hello.
So I guess I'll start. I think I've already said this. I don't have a whole lot of like Resident Evil merch. But I do have sealed Biohazard 2 in Japanese, and I don't know if that's the factory sealed or if someone's resealed one. But a friend who just came back from a holiday in Japan was like, look what I found, here you go. And I was like, cool. And that stayed in its cellophane since. So there you go. Kelsey, you want to go again this way?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same as you. I don't have loads of stuff. I collect a few things, but I think more recently, so I did get all the books, all the S.T. Perry books with the proper covers as well. It always breaks my heart when I see the alternate covers online. And thinking about it, I just think there's something about just having all of them. They all look fantastic.
I think over time as well, those are going to get harder and harder to find. You're not going to print those old covers anymore. So it's not a bad shout.
I do really want to get like the GameCube versions of the games. That's kind of next on my list. But yeah, my collection isn't very expansive for Resident Evil. I think the books is definitely at the moment it's at the top. They're proudly on my shelf. They look amazing, and I haven't read them all. Working my way through it. But yeah, definitely.
Underrated shout to the GameCube. On my shelf, I've got all the GameCube. Yeah. It's nice to see 0 remake, 2, 3, Code Veronica, and 4 in a line. It's cool, all on one console. 2, I think, is like the best way to play a vanilla version of the game. I think, like, obviously, you can mod it on the PC and get high-res graphics and stuff. But I think the GameCube version of 2 runs and looks better than any other version.
But the sound desyncs in that one scene.
Steve?
I'm going to look longingly into Sherwin's eyes and go, my hand painted Resident Evil 2 the board game.
Do you want to sign the basis?
4 hours of Sherwin going. Failing that, I actually do rate those models are really nice. Probably my Resident Evil controller. It's a terrible controller.
Oh yeah, PS1 controller. Yeah,
but I love that controller. It's a unique shape. Could potentially be a very viable cudgel, and it's got Resident Evil written on it. It's kind of neat. My collection's not expansive. I would say the Perry novels too, but Kels is right, and he deserves his answer and gets to keep it for it all himself.
I was going to be greedy and jump in with the second one in a minute, but carry on. I just thought something. So I think I might have told this story when I first came on to First Aid Spray. Was Resident Evil 2. I had a magazine walkthrough for it before I played the game, and I read it cover to cover and studied it. So when I got the game, I knew the game inside out, which I know sounds insane, but I was like 11 years old, and it wasn't insane to me at the time. I just wanted to, read what was going to happen. And that magazine I absolutely loved because it had some just like awesome layout. It was like an 8-page feature, like an entire walkthrough for the game, but like both scenarios. Loved it, and then I lost it, and then a couple of years ago, Luigi from the server found a version of it online for me, like in pristine condition, and it's so sad, just like, this magazine walkthrough.
That's amazing.
But it's just beautiful, like the way it was put together. The magazine was called PlayStation Solutions, and so I got that, paid like 20 quid for it, but that came, and that's in like cellophane.
That's cool.
You need Superman sealed one when you've got that.
Yeah.
You just dug up a memory of mine. I didn't have any officially printed thing, but I remember being so enamoured with Resident Evil 2. I was in middle school at the time that I printed off a walkthrough someone had made on GameFAQs or whatever, stapled it, and just read it like a book.
Yeah.
It's literally not a book at all. It was like, now you go in this room, there is ammo here. I was just so dumb.
That magazine, I remember, referred to the lab liquors as Claude liquors as well, because there was a debate for ages what they're called, and I always knew them as Claude liquors because of that walkthrough. Whether that's their official name or not, I don't know.
It isn't actually, is it?
No, that's what I mean.
It has a story about that. Sherwin, what's your...
I'm not terribly materialistic, so I don't have... anything I have is mostly happenstance from the past or whatever. I do have like I've still got all of my original games, so I've still got that kind of left me with, I guess, a bit of a collection. Most people's eyes. I've still got the original PlayStation games. I've got Deadly Silence, the Nintendo 64 RE, that sort of stuff. So I guess the unique item I can talk about is I've got a bunch of the original Japanese soundtracks.
Oh yeah.
So I've got RE1, RE2, RE3, RE4, RE5, the orchestra ones they did, and then a couple of really random town kind of different bits and pieces. But yeah, so that's probably the closest thing, because obviously that's more my focus and interest of what it was in a time before Spotify and other such things. Had to get these things, but that's pretty much, I think, my only real things. Otherwise, I generally don't tend to hang on to bits and pieces too much. When I've got a whole bunch of prototypes of Resident Evil stuff from board games, but that doesn't necessarily count. So those are just things that I can't really show light of day. I can't really destroy properly, so therefore they can just live in my room with me wondering how I get rid of them. But there we are.
James?
I'm not really a materialistic person, but I do have a Resident Evil 2 PC game.
Oh, amazing.
Which a friend of mine gave to me and said, "Oh, you might like this." And the CD is perfectly, it's fine. Like, so I don't think it'll run on my PC because you need Windows 95 or 98 for it. But it's there. But otherwise, I don't really have a lot of Resident Evil stuff. Because I think mostly it's the games that really interest me the most. The merch has been pretty lackluster in the years that I've...
Yes.
You didn't like them t-shirts?
No. I made them in 18 minutes. The merch hasn't been great. Like, I've seen a lot of folks in Discord who shared like their Stars badges and their Samurai Edges, which look really dope. And the figures that have been coming out recently have been kind of cool, as well, from Numbskull. But otherwise, I'm not, like, it has to be something really special for me to go, I'll get that.
Where's the Kenner Toys Resident Evil playset?
Exactly, yeah. But I know I didn't want to do this early, but I think the thing that has been the best thing to collect is all the friends I've made.
Oh, James. No one's topping that.
Yeah, you are dead to me.
Okay, so a lot of these questions come anonymously as well. So this one is anonymous. Certain people, possibly Welsh, claim incorrectly that the water puzzle in RE3 is easy. What's the Resident Evil puzzle you struggle with the most?
I don't know what this is.
Go ahead, Kels.
So this is very recent. Originally, I would have said the Ashley puzzle in Resident Evil 4, which you think, it's really easy if you know the solution. But ignoring that, on Rebirth mode...
Every puzzle was easy if you know the solution.
On Rebirth mode of Deadly Silence, just after you first encounter Neptune, you have to go into the little room and you have to turn the valve. But on Rebirth mode, you have to turn it with the stick. But I don't know if just the DS I have is crap. It does not fucking turn, and I think I must have died like 15 times just trying to get the valve to turn. And so it's not through that the puzzle is complex, it's just that the mechanic won't bloody work.
That sounds like broken DS.
Yeah. That one is recently the one I've struggled with more than anything, easily.
Steve?
See, I want to say something really... It's truthfully childish, but there's a puzzle in RE4. Yeah, I know. Calm down.
This is the one behind the church.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, if you know the solution, I can do it by muscle memory. If I break that muscle memory at any point, I'm there for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, you know the solution, just know, but it's just like, all right, I count the notches of and then if that rhythm breaks, my brain just fries. So yeah, it's that one.
That's mine as well. Yeah, it's definitely mine. It should be so simple, but it's not. It's not. And I think on separate ways it's different as well, isn't it?
Yes, I've used it
even
reverse.
more infuriating. Yeah. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. Sherwin, what is your least favourite puzzle in Resident Evil?
I don't have a least favourite. Wasn't the question?
Well, the one you struggle with.
Yeah. The one probably that comes to mind isn't the warp puzzle, which is pretty straightforward. Is just throwing it out there straight away. never struggled with that one. But it's probably in RE3. It's the clock tower.
The thing with the gems and
because it randomises, and it has 2 variables on it, which is interesting. So yeah, that's probably the one. I mean, there's a special shout out for the. I do have to throw a special shout out for Remake and the button key combination to get into the chemical room. That's a particular pain in the arse for both Remake and original. But yeah.
No, yes, fair. James, puzzle that you struggled with the most?
I'm gonna pick 2. I'm gonna cheat. One that is very obvious. I have a real problem with object permanence. Like if things change, my brain if the puzzle's in front of me, physically I can do it, but if it's in a video game, for some reason my brain can't figure it out. So the in Remake 2, the keypad things, I do this.
The little mini save.
Yeah. I have to do this thing. I have to say numbers out loud that work, right? Or else I can't do it. But I've been stuck there for like several minutes, just going 6, 5, 3, and then just kind of, and it doesn't work. What the did I get wrong? And then I think somebody said to me in chat, no, that's not the way you do it. I'm like, that's the way I've done it. So pretty much the only way I've done it is by brute forcing it, apparently. The other one, I'm going to mention it because it was kind of cute. Also, we haven't really mentioned like the later games. Is in Village, one of the treasure rooms is you have to shoot. You get a little bit of a teaser earlier on in the game, but you have to shoot this fire brazier on a chain to hit. And then one of them you have to it's really hard because you have to be really quick on the guns, but you have to break a wall to also get something. I remember being stuck on that for a good long while. Where's the other one? Because at the beginning of the game it kind of gives you a really, really easy one where I think it said something stupid like you have to light the way or something like that, but yeah, this one was kind of interesting because it was so hard. You had to be so quick with the shooting, it's only shooting you could do it with. Basically, you have to get it right on the apex of the chain. So yeah, those are my 2. I would say that the
Remake 2 ones, that's a great
shout
because you need to do that. Like it's not like it's an avoidable thing. Like you get they're not.
Is it pieces?
The keypad bits. So actually, I guess you don't need them.
They're just if you want the extra items.
Right, so not like you're speed running. That's a relief.
So if it's Steve, you need to do that.
It's loose. I have to get it.
Interesting story on those. So when we released the board game for 2, we were invited to a RE2 launch party by Capcom, which we went to. And as part of that, this is before the video games landed, so everyone's really excited. They've got some of the public there, so it's in this cool little bar, like this retro gaming bar in South London. We're all there, we're all hanging out. One of the things they did was, bear in mind, no one has seen this game at all. They're like, right, here's a puzzle from the game. We're going to give you 90 seconds to try and solve it. With like this group of people watching, and one random lucky person volunteers and then goes up there, right? This German guy, and he's like, okay. And basically Kat is there, the community manager, and she explains, right, okay, so here's the situation you need to do. This is it. See if you can open this puzzle lock, right? So you can imagine this person in a noisy bar, and he's like pushed the button and really identifies what the lights and bits and pieces are, and he's like doing it, and we're all watching, and people are like, oh, do it this one, this is the one, and everything else. And like this guy eyes on the prize, like you can tell, blocked out everyone else, and he literally goes presses all the buttons and then goes, right, dum 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 dum, and just does it. And it's like, that's some scary level of attention. Like literally just tried every single button once, went, right, now I know, and just did it. And I just looked at that, I was like, okay, you are like Galaxy Brain or something. I'm like you, Alda. I'm doing it and I'm talking and telling a story out loud.
Amazing. Okay, so someone has asked, apologies if this is common knowledge, I would like to know how you all got together and started First Aid Spray, please. I think we have told some of this story in various different places. I don't know if we ever put it on a podcast before, so yeah, why not? So I actually looked back a little bit through history, and I found on the 23rd of October 2018
a Facebook
message that I sent to Steve. who was a fellow YouTuber at the time. That's how we knew each other and conversed about Resident Evil via Twitter and Facebook Messenger at the time.
Yeah.
And I sent Steve a message at 8:55 p.m. on this day. Hey dude, you're at work right now. Steve said, I'm on the bus back. Sup, Chief? I said, everything's fine. No need to panic. I was just having some musings recently, and I was wondering if you'd be interested. My brain has been forming ideas for a project of sorts, one that I likely have no time or energy for. Well, I wrote up some notes that may interest you. Again, I may be crazy and out of my depth, but hey ho, sometimes the brain just gets set on an idea for a while. I thought it was quite funny. And Steve was just like, yeah, let's do the thing.
Yeah.
And then
Sink or swim.
basically, and I was like, yeah, okay, I don't know who with. And then Steve suggested Jordan, another YouTuber that I'd done stuff with, Sherwin, who had also done stuff with for YouTube because of the board games. We all sat down in a Discord call. I'd all spoken to you a little bit before, but none of you had spoken to each other. We kind of like went through some of my ideas for the podcast, and then we recorded an episode, and the first episode came out on the 28th of November, so just over a month later.
Just going to actually a second. It was actually a Skype call.
Was it a Skype call?
Skype in 2018.
I know we went to Discord pretty quick though, because obviously the idea of recording on the server was one of the things that was on that sort of document that still exists somewhere. But yeah, and then so the thing of it is, and I may have said this before, is like if you were to go back and listen to early episodes of this podcast, and I don't listen to anything that we put out after it's done, but I imagine them might sound a little bit different or maybe a little bit awkward because we didn't really know each other that well back then, which is kind of nice because basically like our friendships formed via making the podcast. So that's pretty much how it got going. You know, we just kind of took a punt on it, and now we are here about 4 years later.
Hating each other in person instead of learning. No, I'm kidding.
And obviously you, James and Steve, you knew each other for a little bit beforehand for a few years.
Me and James have been local to one another, go to like local gaming events, and from there it spiraled into let's play all the Resident Evil games before our E2 remake comes out.
Let's play other games too.
Yeah, and then I watched those videos. And I was like, James sure does love Rebecca. Let's talk about Rebecca. And then that snowballed, and then Kelsey joined the server one day and was like, I would like to help in any way I can. And there you go.
It was funny, I always tell this story because, like, I don't know if it's because my memory is awful, but I do remember doing that file reading and for the...
First episode, I think.
The Keeper, I think. Was it The Keeper?
Mendez, you did.
Yeah, Mendez,
Yes.
yeah. And I remember that happening and then being invited to the Rebecca Chambers one. And at that point, I wasn't staff. And yeah, I remember just one day being staff. I remember waking up and I was part of First Aid Spray. And I think I messaged Steve and I was like, what's happened? Or something. Like, you know, and I'm like, oh, if you want, you could be. I'm like, oh, wow. That's yes, of course.
It goes to show how quickly we started taking things sort of perhaps way too seriously for a dinky little podcast. Now professionally we take everything, because I remember I asked if I could call you to ask if you would like to be part of the team.
Oh yeah.
Remember
And
that?
when you did that, I thought you were calling because you were struggling with something on Premiere. I remember you were having some.
I was like, yes, can you use it instead of me? You're now fun.
Yeah. That was very professional. Oh yeah. Do you know what was weird? Is that day you did that, I remember specifically we had a power cut for like 3 hours as well. And I was really stressed out. Like we couldn't even get the oven to work and stuff like that. And then you were like, oh yeah, did you want to come on board properly? Because I'd already been doing loads of stuff anyway.
Yeah, you've done villains, haven't you?
Yeah, and like loads of the videos and things like that. And I was like, yeah, of course, no problem, that's amazing. And it was just like, it was a weird thing where we do take it seriously. Like you're saying, oh, it's this dinky little podcast, but well, yeah, we're passionate for it. And so, you know, when you care about it, moments like that feel serious. And yeah, it was really, really nice to be asked to come on board.
So did the electric start working in the clouds parts?
Yeah.
You know,
Everything fixed. Yeah.
The birds start singing to you, you know, the full Disney moment.
Yeah. And then I think what was funny was we were going to make me an official member on the Reverse episode, and then
yes, that's right.
And then Reverse never came out. And I was like, I guess I'm not an official member.
Yeah. Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you're like, oh, I don't want to announce it like this, but here we go. Split suppose.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
It's fine.
Oh dear.
Someone asked, I've always wondered how you all managed to resist talking over each other like a lot of opinion-related panels of people can do. Was this something discussed in advance as a podcast format, or did you just fall into this respectful talk then listen behaviour? It's so nice that each person has a time to speak. Smiley face.
We're all pointing at Sai.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Partly, yes, I am to blame for that, but also going back to what we were saying before is that we didn't know each other particularly well. So I think everyone was a little bit like, do I speak now? I'm going to be respectful and wait for anyone else to talk. So I fell into a bit like, you go now, then you go. But yeah, I think it was probably just something that I picked up from other podcasts anyway, and knowing when you got enough people on a podcast, the worst kinds of shows are the ones that fall apart because everyone is arguing and trying to get their bit in. That's fair enough, but everyone needs to.
I mean, we also have we have episodes where it's complete chaos, like the film.
It is fun where I just
clubs.
I can just stop and let it go, and you all do take your turns. You're not necessarily interrupting each other. But.
Yeah, I think it's, we're all quite polite people.
Speak for yourself.
When it comes to podcasts as well.
We're all British.
Yeah,
we know how to cue.
It's a very British First Aid Spray podcast. Sherwin, this one is for you specifically. How does it make you feel knowing that Resident Evil the board game goes through so much back and forth with Capcom to get approvals on various items, and yet Capcom allows such horrendous live action media? And about 6 question marks.
So, I mean, a couple of things. One, actually, Capcom are really, really awesome to work with. We don't have that many back and forths at all. There's a nice trust relationship with them where they trust that we have a great deal of respect and knowledge of what the games are, and we'll treat them quite reverently, to a point I actually think that astonishes them sometimes. And so therefore they don't necessarily need to go back and forth with us as much. It's normally when we're sort of doing something a little bit more out there, like, hey, can I turn our Kickstarter campaign to an open world project, or hey, I'd like to recreate and give David Ford a face, that sort of stuff. Right. So that's normally where there's any sort of back and forth. I think the true answer with that is that when we deal with Capcom, we're dealing with Capcom Direct. It's literally a very direct line between us and them. When I think you have other bits and pieces happening, like the television shows and the movies and so on. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of this, but what I imagine is that there's a chunk of Resident Evil which is owned by Sony or whoever else.
Constantine have rights, don't they, to
exactly.
live action.
So I don't know how much control Capcom are able to exert over that, as part of what that is. And as I imagine, therefore, if that's the case, there's a whole bunch of very different processes that have to be followed. And I think a lot of that is not necessarily having the control or a veto to say, no, this can't be the way because this is it. And I think that's the first element. The second one is obviously what we do is generally an adaptation or a recreation of something existing, which is a very very physical and very kind of, like if you're remaking a game, we all know the ins and outs of the game. Every single person on this podcast, everyone listening to this podcast can probably tell you every detail of what that game is. So it's a very finite and controlled thing. If you're creating something new, then there's more of there's much more runway in front of you in terms of where you want to go. But the other element is obviously you don't have to, how do you adhere to something that you don't know where you're going with because it's brand new? So I think that also comes into it as well.
Definitely, absolutely.
So about that polite list then. Not a single one of us interrupted you, Sherwin.
There you go.
Sign of respect and reverence.
So the Mutant Man asked a bunch of questions, so thank you to them. A lot of them were really, really good. So let's kick off with, if SD Perry was contracted to adapt one more Resident Evil game into a book, which would you prefer it to be? Kelsey, what Resident Evil game needs a book?
I should say I haven't read all of the SD Perry books, but if I wanted a book version, I think I would say 7, just because
that'd be cool.
7 is not my favourite game, but 7 brought a lot of Resident Evil back that I thought had been missing, and I just think, in terms of that setting and the family and everything, kind of, it's so self-contained, and it would just make for a much more interesting book than anything like Resident Evil 6, which is this globe-trotting, just...
That would be,
I don't want to say nonsense, but, so a game like 7, and I love Village, but I think even that branches into a bit more kind of, a bit too chaotic maybe for my liking, but I think for a book, something that's close to something Stephen King might write, 7 and the location and the characters and that, I think would be amazing to expand upon in a book. And just for what it's worth, a TV series, I think it could work. I might have mentioned that before, but yeah, definitely 7.
It's a good re-entry if they were to rehire. It's like, right, here's the sort of more recent stuff. And also, uniquely, that would probably be the only book in the series that's written from one perspective.
Yeah.
It would all be about from Ethan's perspective, which is probably what it should be, because that's obviously a big part of the game.
Yeah.
So that would be cool.
See, I'm going to be facetious.
Okay. You're going to have to
poo-pooed the
remake
idea
2.
of RE6.
Yeah,
Right?
okay.
You poo-pooed RE6. I say go for that one. Make it a 3-part epic. So it's like Lord of the Rings. SD Perry's Lord of the Rings with zombies.
Parts of one book here, parts of one book here to get the order right.
But no, the only reason I would say is because if she was to do something on that monumental scale, it's a global crisis.
Yeah.
Right. She can also tie up. Assuming she gets one shot, this is her last round of the
I see where this is
Magnum.
going.
She gets to write off the entire story.
Yeah.
And she's got the entire world to play with.
Yeah.
Like, I know RE6 is a convoluted mess. It makes Dark Souls look like a coherent, straightforward narrative. All right, but there's lots of hanging plot threads regarding like Rogue Stars groups, Trent, and all this other stuff throughout the Perryverse itself. Its unique DNA, which lends itself to the espionage thriller stuff underneath RE6, which, as crazy as it sounds, I think could work. It means you have to explain what happened in 4 and 5 off screen or off page, but I would go for the manic mess there is, so you can just do everything and tie up every
basically make it better is what you're saying.
a little bit. Plus you can kill off Wesker in that, and then it's done. He's gone.
It's a fair point.
Sherman?
Survivor.
Yes. Great choice.
I think there's a whole bunch of different stuff that would work really well as literary devices in that book. In that game. I think it's much more her wheelhouse from what I've read of her previous stuff anyway. Much more, and this is not intended in a derogatory way, much more smaller focus rather than trying to expand on a larger universe which is just massive and sprawling and difficult to get hold of. It's much more like a very self-contained, punchy kind of episode of something. I think that would work really well.
That's mine as well, because I feel like you do a good job of what little we get out of those characters. We get a little more insight into who some of those characters are, and it has one of the best stories in the series, even though it's unfortunately trapped in Survivor in some people's eyes. But like the cutting into children's brains stuff's pretty dark, and she does her like scary, gory stuff very well.
The evil science.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of that. Basically, James.
I think 7 and Village would be a great double. Like you could make that into a nice story, because it lends perfectly to a good story, because you've got the slow ramp up of the house, and then you've got your third act, which would be after the castle in Village.
Interesting.
And I think that, but I don't want to, because we've already mentioned 7. I think RE4. And I think RE4 because there's not a lot of information about that game.
True, also true.
And she loves talking about fossils, and that game. I just want more about the fossil that we find in RE4. And I think
this is where the T-Rex POW came from, the fossil in Spain.
And I think she would have lended a way better description, and she would have lent way better to the characterization of the story rather than what the game did, which was awful in my opinion. I don't, in terms of who the characters were and who we knew them as. Leon is a big one. I like Leon in RE4, but he's not Leon that we all know.
Garden Leon. It's got green blood, I bet you.
But so it would have been nice, because we would have got some prior knowledge of what he'd been up to, maybe why he'd become this way, or even she might have dumbed him down a little bit. We might have got a little bit more information on Ada Wong, maybe a little bit more on the origins of. We're always wanting more Ada Wong, but might have got more origins about the prior life to the village that happened as well. Kind of like what we got with RE Village. When you finish the game, you get a full
RE4 has
story.
a similar thing where you see this is what it was like. She could do something with that.
It just would have been really, really nice. There's literally even after playing that game, I feel like RE4 is still a blank canvas. In terms of what you can do with it, the monster design and the gameplay is second to none. But everything else, SD Perry could have really grown expanded them.
Just on that, just throwing out there, that's the reason why the parasite in RE4 can't take root in Leon and really isn't really that much of a threat, even though despite the characters talking about it a bit, is because there's already a parasite in there with green blood, and that's why.
Exactly.
Actually, the actual real story of RE4 is those two parasites fighting each other.
I just wish we had more of those books. You know, like so many other big franchises. You know, Resident Evil is a huge franchise, and it feels like those books are. It's like, oh, that's it. There's those books there, and that's it. Why there's not just more all the time? I don't understand. You know, you mentioned Village. I would love to read a book about Village. You know, with how they, you know, all started getting tested on, and you know, particularly Lady D and stuff like that, and just that character stuff. Because I love the monster stuff I've mentioned before. It's great, but seeing them go through the stuff to get there, it's perfect for a book because you don't really want to play a game of Lady D's, you know, the stuff that she's going through. So it makes sense, and I don't know why we don't get it. I really don't. As you know, there's like a 50 million Star Wars books now, and Halo books. There's like 20 Assassin's Creed books.
Yeah,
really?
All the examples
so many.
I think the key thing you're talking about there is the games the IPs you just mentioned. They're all American licenses, very different approach. Resident Evil was very.
That's fair.
Resident Evil was very much rooted in Japanese, in Capcom Japan, and there's other issues that they like to be more protective.
It makes sense. It makes sense. It's just a shame because I think there's so much there. You know, there's always arguments about canon and stuff like that. And I'm not saying the books need to be canon, but just it's like with Alien as well. When we read these other things, I on James's recommendation have been working my way through like loads of Alien novelizations and audio dramas as well, and it's just like increased my love for the franchise. For a franchise I didn't think I could love anymore. There's some stuff that's like, oh, that wasn't great, but there's some stuff that was like, this is better than anything in any of the movies and stuff like that. So it's a missed opportunity, and I wish that those books weren't just kind of locked to whenever the last one came out, early 2000s or something. So
Is it Code Veronica or Zero, which it ends on, which means it's like a flashback to the beginning that's not referenced,
Yeah, Code Veronica is the most recent in the story, and then Zero came after that, which obviously is set way before. But then there's a sudden drop-off. I think, Sharon hit the nail on the head with the fact that it's more difficult because it's a Japanese license. It's funny, it's a shame, because I don't know if we talked about it in book club how Resident Evil was one of the first series to actually go, let's make a bunch of books about the games and spinning off from the games. And now, as you say, it's a big thing that Halo, Gears, Assassin's Creed, they've all done, but truthfully, American.
Gears just had another book last year. I think that's 9 books now.
That series
has had.
It would be great to get some young talent as well, like for
people who are fans of the game as well. Sometimes you might think, hey, maybe you shouldn't bring on fans, but there are fans who are good writers, as well. So
it's one of those things where, not to get way off track, but like, if they made it its own contained thing, it'd be fine, and it would upset people way less than the Netflix show did, because it's just a bunch of books. It won't be quite. People will just be like, and move on. Unlike the TV show, where it's like
Winter's person.
I mean, some people do still get mad. There's a thing in one of those Alien books where like Ripley actually got found like during that time she was drifting in the 40s, and then has her memory wiped. And so people are like, what? How dare they do that? But that ending part is annoying. But the story that she's in, it's like, I don't mind, they just did it, it's his own little thing there.
There's an interesting thing with that, and we are going off down a random tangent. I also don't care, because I'm all about memory card. But like, I'm actually okay with stuff like that. Like, can you imagine if you found the ship and they find Ripley on it, and then by the end of they might spend the entire book like running around on the ship, Ripley never wakes up, and then by the end of the book they're gone, and then you would never know anything's happened. That's kind of cool. I'm good with that idea. And especially if you were able to find like one thing from the ship, like one strange look from Ripley, something that might have moved or something or other. For example, that'd be cool. One of the best Star Wars, or there's 3 of them, but 2 of them are the ones that resonate with me the most. There's the best Star Wars novels. Is Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina and Tales from Jabba's Palace. Right. And basically what they sat down and did, let's use the Mos Eisley one as an example, right? So they took the Cantina scene, they saw all of these different aliens who are in the thing, and basically said to a bunch of people, right, short story anthology, pick one of the aliens, write their story of how they got to here, and then basically show the scenes from the canteen. It could be that's what it leads up to, could be that's a starting point, and then you find out what the ending did afterwards, could be in the middle, whatever works for you. And then basically you can use that to flesh out the character however you want, because these are unknowns for the most part. And Greedo's in there, and so what's his face, Doctor, I can't remember his name, but the guy who doesn't like you either, that guy. But they kind of threw that in there. It's really interesting just seeing the creativity of people talking about it, like reading like the band actually were originally on planet because of Jabba and escaped from his palace and stuff like that. Is it canon? Who cares?
No,
that's just fun.
I was just going to say, it does not matter, because then even for you, if you enjoy it, the next time you watch the movie, you'll be like, you'll think about that story, give you so much more context.
So shout out to everybody, go find those books, they're awesome.
Also, there's a similar one in the Alien series called Bug Hunt, which kind of follows a bunch of Colonial Marines and the history of everything. And again, it elevates your watch of Aliens if you watch it, because you know where the pulse rifle came from, you know what these Marines have dealt with before as well. Like these guys are not green, and if you watch that, if you if you listen or you read it, you'll get to know it. But yeah, we have
especially good if there's like a touch point with the source material at some point. I could see a really awesome Resident Evil novel set at the point of the outbreak in the Spencer Mansion, whereas see a couple researchers, you know they are doomed from the start of it. But maybe not. Maybe a couple of them do get away. You don't know the answer to that. Point is that if you can then have enough touch points where it can explain why.
You throw in a name like Henry Sarton or whatever. It's like that guy wrote that note. You know?
Or you even have like you can do really awesome things like we found like Ted, the old Ted the gardener or whatever. We trapped him in this room, and then that way people will then play the game. That's why that zombie's in that room.
That's
the guy they just trapped in. Yeah, exactly. That sort of stuff. Brilliant.
I love tie-ins like that.
In that Rivers of Blood base, or River of Pain.
I just finished that one a couple of weeks ago.
Spoilers for River of Pain, Aliens. It happens during the Hadley's Hope disaster, and it turns out some people actually get out alive. And you could just happily have people escape the Spencer estate and like the downfall of the mansion. I'd love that. I mean, we could say, what was Umbrella doing during the outbreak? And then that's a podcast for the future. Operation Raccoon City.
Anyway.
So, we are going to get off Resident Evil for a couple of questions. Somebody asked, what is everyone's favourite game that isn't a Resident Evil game? We might have covered these in various places, including, our own Twitter feeds. Kelsey, go.
It's so difficult. I mean, just picking a favourite anything is difficult, really. This broad. I would say, if I had a gun to my head, my favourite game that isn't Resident Evil would be Metal Gear Solid 3, which I know is kind of a boring choice. There's like hundreds of games that maybe were even more impactful for me, but I don't know, something about it that I think that's so close to perfection, that game. There's a couple of things that maybe don't work for me, but I might have told this story before. The main thing that still sticks with me to this day is the first time I played MGS3. So obviously it was on PS2. Pop it in, play. I think I played for like 4 hours, and then the opening credits rolled. And that didn't really happen on those PS2 games back in the day. And I think I just sat back and had to take a moment and was blown away. And all the stuff that happens, like when he loses his eye and things like that. I think that's Kojima's high point is MGS3, and I think lots of people think the story is over the gameplay. I think the gameplay is great. Some of the camouflage stuff maybe not so, but if I had to pick one, MGS3.
Best sniper fight in the series, fight me. Mine is Red Alert 2, and that's because it hits the joy center for me. It's a simple RTS game where you're fighting as the Allied forces versus the evil Soviets, and they take over the US and destroy landmarks, and it's just a simple game, but it's just something that is from a childhood. That's I like base building games, I like war simulation games. It's got a rocking soundtrack, and it takes me straight back to the early 2000s, where I had more hair and a lot more sugar in my drinks. I don't know how else to describe it. It's one of those. It's like my favourite movie is still Transformers the movie. It's nostalgia stuff.
It's the greatest movie ever made.
That is true. That's it. I mean, what other films start with mass genocide in the opening 5 minutes? It's for children. Red Alert 2. I don't know why it's not sophisticated. I would say it's definitely probably not going to be the highest brow choice on this table. I mean, we've already got high caliber stuff like MGS3, which in terms of gameplay stuff is like pretty up there even now.
That stuff with the end as well. There's just so much in that game. It's just nuts.
So
I feel like Red Alert 2 is pioneering.
Well, it's still
What
by
it
some it's
does.
considered the best MGS, the best RTS campaign to date because the way that the missions don't echo each other, but they echo each other enough that you can see this is what the Russians will be doing, this is what the Allies will be doing. But the characters are all camp silly fun anyway, so you don't have to take it serious. Just blow stuff up and build really nice looking bases.
Sherman?
Vagrant Story.
Yes.
You knew that was coming.
I knew, yes, I know.
You totally knew that was coming. I think I've talked about this before. Vagrant on the podcast, I mean. Vagrant Story for me it's a perfect example of exactly how long and how detailed a JRPG should be. It's not too sprawling, it's nice and contained in terms of the actual theme and spirit of it, which is really awesome. It's got a crafting system in it, but it's not massively overdrawn. It's not like you're literally looking at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of items looking for super rare drops or anything.
Yeah.
It's got that nice sort of feel to it that because a lot of the stuff you can craft drops from random drops, like actually there is kind of almost, rather than that I'm going out there to go farm enemies kind of perspective to go get the exact things, it's more like this is my experiential playthrough of this particular thing, which is really awesome. I think it came, like in terms of the actual graphics and the presentation of it and the sound and everything else, it came out right at the end of the PlayStation era, really. So everyone knew exactly what the machine was capable of and really pushed it to its limits. What this is, it's a beautiful, beautiful game.
I know we were talking about it the other week because I was doing some research on it for some writing, and I didn't know that it was the only PlayStation 1 game rated by Famitsu a perfect score.
Yeah.
More than any other game on PlayStation 1 with all those hits.
Yeah.
It got a perfect score. So
I can't recommend it enough. It really is. I mean, like the storytelling, the way it's self-contained, even the new game plus in terms of it opens up new areas. It's not just a simple playthrough that we had before. The fact that the crafting system actually is robust enough that when you're playing it, when you're in new game plus, there's still extra stuff to go to. You're not just playing with your power weapons now and you're ignoring everything else. So yeah, really solid. I mean, I should, in interest of not repeating myself because I've done that before, obviously. The other game that I guess could give a shout out to of recent years is Fire Emblem Three Houses, because I really do love that game. For me, I think the reason why Three Houses is so good, I mean the Fire Emblem games have been going on a very much an upwards trajectory since Fire Emblem Awakening, but for me Three Houses was the step up that was the difference between Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy VII. Like it's a whole new step where this game is going. Now, what's mildly disappointing, having seen Fire Emblem Engage, is that they've got Colgate Chan and they seem to take a step backwards to really bad direction with that. So I'm not so much. I'll obviously be excited about seeing it and playing it. I will be, but I'm less enthused. It almost feels like they've not worked out what resonated so much for Three Houses with everybody, and they've kind of instead just gone back to previous thing. But that could just well be in the design, to be fair. Hopefully that's the case, and it's literally just one character's shoddy design.
It's like Pepsi Man.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Pepsi Man. It really is bad. There's no other way of saying it.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah. Anyway,
James?
I love Vagrant Story. However, I was too stupid to play that game.
You're never stupid, James.
I feel like I was too young to play that game because the thing that
it's very involved.
Yeah, like I remember the thing that drew my eyes to that game was the cover. Like the cover on that game is spectacular. It's so pretty, and it stood out during a time when Final Fantasy was very popular as well, and like the art style is kind of very similar, but it still stood out. So I love Vagrant Story. I love the characters in it. I love the combat system. I was just too dumb. But yeah, my favorite game. It's funny that I say like I was too dumb to play that, but my favorite game is Baldur's Gate, which came out at a similar time.
Noted survival horror game, yeah?
It can be if you want it to be. Yeah, try and play as a wizard. That's survival horror. Baldur's Gate. This game is one of the first epic adventures that ever came out. It came out on like 8 discs. Had an awesome sleeve. It was green, I remember, and it had a different story on each, like where you took the CD out and had like a little story behind it.
Remember physical cases?
And like when you start that game, it was perhaps the first game that I played where you start off and it's just chill. It's just nothing happening. You know, the tutorial level is immersed in the game. Like you're literally in like Candlekeep, which is like this a place for nerds, basically, a library where all these books are kept from all the ages, and you're a steward of a guy called Gorion who says you're special, like, but he doesn't like want to give you a big ego, so he's like, you know, he's just like, calm yourself down, you know, if you get too egotistic, and you know, you to train you in combat, you have to do like a little side quest. I got a bunch of rats in my basement, you know, it's like, standard. You know, and it's very, you know, and then like, I need to teach you advanced combat, and you know, guard captain, whatever your face is, like, is going to teach you advanced combat. Yeah, and you get like, there's a bunch of these little side quests, and they just make sense. And then you leave Candlekeep. Gorion says we need to leave, right? And you leave, and your best mate Mon says bye to you. You leave, you go into the first area, and Gorion gets murdered, right, mercilessly by this guy called Seravok. And, you know, but he does not go down without a fight. Your dad, your guardian, your stepdad, whoever Gorion is to you, like, he absolutely, almost destroys this entire party other than Seravok. And at this point, you're like, I'm in this. This guy's going down. Yeah. He killed my dad. Yeah. You know? But then it's more than that. This was after the time when the God of Death played a game of Knucklebones with 3 mortal men. Because he was fed up of being the God of Death, right? And he didn't want to do it anymore. So he was like, you 3, you're going to be the God of Death. You're going to be of murder. You're going to be of betrayal. You're going to be of something else. Can't remember what it was. And yeah, unfortunately, that threw everything into a mixing pot. And it turns out that you are you're a spawn of one of these gods. And you can either be good, or you can be bad. Like it was part of the team, part of the BioWare team, Black Isle. Like before they were BioWare, you can have romances, you can build relationships, you can just kill anyone you want, right? You know, or you can keep everybody alive if you want. There is no crafting system at all, because this is a set world after a cataclysmic event, right? So there isn't much of that, but there is so much in this game that I love. It is the beginning of my love for D&D, even though it's AD&D, which is technically 2nd edition. You know, if you play Baldur's Gate, you will learn more about D&D, not just mechanics, but you'll learn more about D&D than you will like from playing Baldur's Gate 3, right, or any other kind of RPG, because it teaches you storytelling and like, you know, being patient and relationships and how to deal with them, role playing, if you want to. Yeah, and it's all set in this like really nice, tight, compact story, where, you know, I mean, I say tight, you can go off and do your own thing. The game gives a really good illusion of a huge sprawling world, kind of similar to Dragon Age Origins does, where you have instances, and each instance is huge, and they all have their own little mini dungeons in them, just like a D&D adventure. Yes, that is my favorite game ever.
Wow, I want to play it.
Yeah. Mine, by comparison, is a very linear RPG.
No, that's valid though.
Yeah. So a few years ago, when I was turning 30, I did this thing called 30 for 30, which I totally ripped off from a friend, where every week I was like, you know what, I'm going to actually figure out what my favourite games are, and I'm going to rank them down from 30 down to 1. So Resident Evil 2 was number 1, as obviously. Number 2 was Final Fantasy 7.
Yes.
And that partly was there because if people ask me what is the best game ever made, if you have to have an answer to that, and I don't think there is an answer to that, that is my default answer. I was like, well, ergo, surely it's number 2. Yeah, and for reasons that a lot of you have kind of said, where it's just like, it just came into my life at the right time. The music, more than anything else, has stuck with me until today. And the characters, it's just a game that I can keep going back to, despite being pretty flawed and kind of outdated in certain parts. You know, it's very easy to manipulate the battle system. Some of the translation stuff's pretty dire. Let's mosey, etc.
I love that line.
That's definitely what you want to say before the final boss.
Let's mosey.
Let's mosey. But yeah, no, it's one of those things. It's nostalgia and you can't pick it out, so it is what it is. But on a non-nostalgic choice, I think everyone already knows, because I tweet about it often enough. I think I have said before, if we weren't doing a Resident Evil podcast, I would probably be off somewhere doing a Horizon podcast, probably with you guys at least. Yeah, that game came probably the same thing, where it was like it came at the right time, and just the same thing with Resident Evil, where it's the story in the first game alone is incredible. We'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, there you go. So I tweeted, ask us any question about Resident Evil First Aid Spray or what our favourite Pokemon is. So somebody has asked, what's your favourite Pokemon? Kelsey.
Gengar.
Nice.
Yes, easy. Ghostly Trio are my 3 favourite Pokemon. I know, it's one of the original lineup, but I just think there's something so badass about Gengar. Seems like a little rebel, massive grin. Yeah.
Always having fun.
Yeah.
Eating dreams.
Yeah. It's like perfect design. Like it's got the right amount of cute but darkness.
Evil Clefable.
Yeah. So it's pretty straightforward. And now, any playthrough of Pokemon, that's like my main thing. Like, right, let's get him in. So Gengar for me.
Oh God, I see. I'm a G. I'm not intentionally, but I seem to be a G1er with this. I've only played Red and Blue. Yeah.
I do have a runner-up, but I'll let you finish.
Go.
I was just say Cubone is my second one, but yeah.
Nice.
Aww. See, as a result, mine is more the anime series. So I have an affection for Bulbasaur. I was actually irate that Bulbasaur got passed over for Venusaur in the Smash game. Okay? Because Bulbasaur is a cute, annoying, scrappy-doo-like thing that's got Vine Whip, and it just looks adorable. Like an angry dinosaur with an onion on its back.
Also in the show, he's a real bro as well. He's got big time bro energy.
Yeah. I love Bulba. He brings a smile to my face every time I hear that phrase.
Brobasaur.
Yeah. Here it is.
Secret character from Broforce that we were introduced to last night.
Yeah, there's a bonus episode coming soon on that. A bonus episode? Anyway.
Bonus episode.
It just it lends itself so well to it.
So failing that, it would be Jigglypuff again for its anime portrayal as this very passive-aggressive psychopath whenever you interrupt his singing. I think comic relief characters and bros. That's my thing apparently.
Did you ever see the episode of the cartoon? I imagine you did, where there was the giant Jigglypuff.
Yeah.
And for some reason, because it was giant, it had like weird black stripes on it, and because it was like it was basically like death metal.
Yeah, exactly what
it was amazing. With, like the tattoos and like the thing.
Big fan of Arts and Chains.
So mine is now hopelessly populist because when I played the original games, I played with. I played through what I had Pokemon Red, then Silver, played Sapphire, and then I kind of started to lose track a little bit after that. But yeah, I really liked the Eevee when I first found them. Now that's annoying because Eevee since has become like it's kind of like the corgi of the Pokemon world. And since then it's become massively populist, which is a bit of a shame. But of those, I really like Vaporeon.
Ah, nice. Yeah.
Because that was my first Eevee evolution I had. It was a little Pokemon called Seven Dust.
Cool. Good. I like it.
And I obviously gave it its Waterstone, and its health shot up to insane levels, and I remember looking at it going, oh, it's amazing. But if I wanted to go away from that, because I should do, I am a sucker for a Nidoking for exactly the same reason. Nidoking, I don't know if you anybody who played Red will remember the graphic for Nidoking. It literally looks like Godzilla. And I remember I gave it its Moonstone, it evolved. Didn't realise how much I was nerfing the crap out of it because it doesn't learn anything in Red after you've done that. So literally, it got Thrash straight away, which was insane at the level I had, which is like level 20 something. So Thrash is just annihilating everything in front of it. Which was really sad when I then got, I think it was Pokemon Coliseum, the first time you see it, actually how big it is, and I'm like, oh, you're kind of crap. You were Godzilla, you filled up the entire screen with just how massive you were. And then I realised, because Red's massive issue it has is that it doesn't show scale for Pokemon very well. And then kind of looked at it, I was like, oh, you're kind of crap. It wasn't as disappointing as evolving up that Dratini all the way up through Dragonair, suffering through that thing, and then getting up to a Dragonite and going, is that you? You look kind of like a Moomin. I'm not really loving you. I thought I was going to get actually something good after getting here. Anyway.
My favorite Pokemon is Abra.
Yeah.
Good choice.
And it's Abra because every time I start a new playthrough of the original games, I got Pokemon Blue. Was because I spent so many hours at Nugget Bridge trying to catch Abra. Like, I wouldn't try. And by the way, my first Abra that I caught was called Nugget. Because they look like nuggets. I never, because I had no friends, I never trained it. So I never got, Alakazam or Kadabra. Like, but to be honest, Abra is enough. Like, Abra, yeah, I spent so many hours trying to get Abra.
And got sad when it evolved.
Right,
I liked you when you're an Abra.
Look how ugly you are now. Like, my boy. And Abra's always been a mainstay of my team to go into, like, the 6 with. Like, it's just a very strong Pokemon, and it's cute. And I always put a lot of time into it. So, yeah. If I was going to choose a quick runner-up...
go for it.
I don't know.
Dave.
Yeah, no.
Jinx.
Probably...
No. Everyone has gone.
Absolutely
We don't talk
not.
about Jinx.
I would say Togepi, actually. Cause
Nice. Yeah. Okay,
Togepi.
There was something so like enigmatic about Togepi, I think. Yeah.
Also, I had a little... I don't have them anymore. I don't know where they disappeared to. But I had a little plush of Togepi.
Yeah. But same with it, I think lots of the I was going to say devolutions versions, but those new versions that came out, like in Gold and Silver, like with Pichu and stuff, it was like,
Baby
what?
forms.
There's a baby one. Like,
I do like a lot of people will probably expect me to say Rowlet, right? But like I do love Rowlet. Rowlet is one of my favorite Pokemon to look at. But there's so many. Again, Rowlet, right? Its evolutions are awful, right? But Rowlet's base is like superior, right? But yeah, I've got so much more history with Togepi and Abra.
What's the name of that sheep one that's in Sword and Shield that everyone's banging about?
Oh, no.
The new one. I think it's new.
Wooloo.
Yes, I know they're like meant to be like the Rastar of that game, but they look adorable.
Yeah, Wooloo's great. And also a fantastic name.
Yeah.
So I'm glad
We went to the same place.
Nice. I'm glad that you said Togepi because I've got one that isn't from Generation 1. And at least I'm going to be the Gen Zer and pick something really new. But
I mean, Togepi is basically Gen 1.
Well, it's practically, yeah, but at least it isn't. Yeah. So my sort of runner-up, because I could never actually pick a favourite, but the closest to a favourite for a long time was Praise the Venomoth. I love moths in general. Yeah. But I remember in middle school, there was like a textiles class, and I make a little tiny crap pillow, like the size of your hand. There's not really much of a cushion, is it? And I made a Venonat one, so that goes to show, I guess. But my actual answer, funny enough, is an Eevee evolution, and it's Sylveon. Fairy type is a boss, carried me through X and Y to the point where when I start a new Pokemon game, I'll always use something new, unless there's a Sylveon, in which case they come in a meeting. Also, it's Transpride Eevee.
Yeah.
So. It can't get better than that. Okay, so some in-depth Resident Evil questions next.
Oh wow, here we go.
In all seriousness, regardless of how much you like or dislike the idea, do you think we might actually be getting Wesker clones in an upcoming game?
I'm going to say I think we might do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think since this Netflix show did it, I feel like that idea... I don't think that idea's come from nowhere. I think it's been floating around in the background, and I think Resident Evil has struggled to find the new villain, and it happens in so much media, in so many movies. They bring people back, and it's been a while. I'm not saying it's going to happen with Resident Evil 9, but I think it's going to happen. And as for how I feel about it, I mean, I don't know. I think it just depends. It depends how it's executed. My initial instinct is to go, no, it's bollocks. No, you should, build up something else and something more, something new. But I think if we're going to get a send-off for a long overdue send-off for people like Chris, I think Wesker has to come back one more time, and I think it will potentially be a clone, and they will both be sent off together. And it sounds just crazy to say, but I would take it if it drew a line under it and
So
we
this
just
is
got
the end of
past it
Yeah,
rather than us
maybe.
talking about it. And I don't see how else they'd do it. That you'd be like, okay, they rebuild him or something, but rebuild him how? I mean, it's still going to be kind of a clone. So whether there's loads of clones like the series did, which although silly, I sort of kind of enjoyed in a weird way. But I think a clone Wesker. We've already seen kind of clones in Resident Evil.
Yeah.
I think it will happen. I don't really like
I'm
it.
going to
but
get mine in early that I agree with you in the sense that you look at the fact that he's just had his own Dead by Daylight chapter.
Yeah.
It's named after him essentially. So yeah, like he's obviously
he's like floating around, isn't he?
exactly.
Yeah,
Capcom still know, and the Wesker character was the lead of the show. So yeah, obviously it's still hugely important to Capcom. I think.
And
Go on.
what about End of Village in the helicopter? Are we thinking that this is a
Maybe.
thing that's real, or is it was this like asset reuse, or is it really a clone of
I don't know how to
Chris?
feel about
And,
that one.
yeah,
That would be
it's hard
Wesker
to
twisting
say.
the knife, though,
I
wouldn't it? That would be perfect.
I think that RE4 is going to kind of put some
Plant the seed for that.
plant a seed
yeah.
that Wesker is looking into cloning, and then RE9 is going to, and that if they are going to follow up on RE9, that's what RE4 is going to do. Is be like, right, this is the next game, and then we bounce to the future, the present day or whatever, and that's it. Whether or not that revives them and kills them off in one game, I expect actually probably yes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think Chris will go
think
with
it's, I think it's coming. I would like that at least. If they do it, then you're right. They need to do it and then be done with it. But I don't know if they would go to that extent, considering they still use his character and stuff. Will they go, he's back, and now he's just back forever? He's just back.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I hope it's not that, and they're just going to look at what's popular. I mean, maybe it wasn't popular, but they brought Palpatine back in Episode 9, so Resident Evil 9 is the Palpatine Wesker. So yeah, I don't like it, but I can definitely see it happening. I don't think it's that scary. Oh no, they'll never do that. Yeah, I think they probably will.
I'm unfortunately in agreement. Like, I don't want it to happen, but I can see somehow Albert has returned. It's definitely going to be a meme. I really wish they could just find a way to get off this crux of not killing a bad guy after one game and let him develop long enough to be that level of threat. I mean, we said this in the Villains podcast. Simmons, if he'd have lived,
Would have been potential.
Yeah, he's literally like the anti-colour scheme for Wesker. He looks like the KFC man.
Yeah.
But he also was the architect of it all, really. And he literally could not die in that game. We still think you can yank him off that pillar, he might still turn back on. I don't want Wesker to come back, but I can see it happening. Because I feel like his story has been told, we know the ins and outs, we know everything about him. He literally can only exist to upset Chris and then die fighting Chris. It's like, let's bring Frieza back. Goku beats him up all the time. Can we have a new villain, please? I'm not happy about it. I can see it definitely happening. Like everyone said, the red flags are all there. Project W is probably the big one, right? The Netflix series with the 3 clones. I don't see them going that route with like 3 mouldy, knocked off clones. Hey?
I have opinions.
You have opinions, James.
But I'll let Sherwin go first.
Aww.
That's okay, mine will be quick. I mean, I don't really have a horse in this race. I don't really care so much. I really don't. I think, for me, Resident Evil has proven that it's, Capcom / Resident Evil, whichever way you want to look at it, has more than proved that it is A, jump the shark with Wesker, and B, jump the shark with science. So it wouldn't be surprised to me if it happened.
No.
But unlike the rest of the people sitting at this table, I'm fairly ambivalent to it. Like, ultimately, Wesker for me is... I was never that much into Wesker as a character anyway. Fit Resident Evil 1, that's absolutely fine. But, being the OG trilogy guy that I am, like... By the point where Wesker started basically looking like a really shoddy extra from The Matrix, I just checked out completely, so... Yeah, whatever.
I don't like it, but they would need to twist it. Like,
He's leeches.
no. What I think they could do is we could have a bishop situation, like from Aliens.
So like Chris meets him and he's actually okay.
He's actually an alright guy.
Yeah.
Right,
But
but
he does bleed white and he's stabbing. He's stabbing. Is it Veronica with a broken knife? What's the one with the knife? Is like the super busted weapon?
Yeah, Code Veronica,
Code Veronica. So like actually, So
I
actually,
see
he's
what you're
got the busted knife from Code Veronica and stabbing the shit.
How you doing, Chris?
I do. Like, I think it would be neat if Chris was more aggro, right? And they they basically because I agree with Kelsey. I think they should I think it should be the end, like whatever it is, right? And I think if there's going to be one clone of Wesker, there's going to be several. But I think at least one or two of them should be good.
Like the Netflix series essentially implied.
Kind of, right? But I think Chris should think that they're bad.
See, I'm going to give you a different plot twist. How about you have this thing where you meet like the two of them good together and you realise the entire time Chris has actually been the bad guy, Wesker's been the good guy.
I've always known this, Sherwin. I've always known this.
Have I stumbled into an age-old argument? I could see that. That's kind of an interesting thing. But I mean, at that point, so much of the identity of Wesker is a bad guy. Like that would just get rejected by the fans. Not that we should be purely led by that.
But that's why I say there should be bad ones, right? Or there should be one bad one. There should be one that everybody can go.
So is Wesker Majin Buu now?
You're a bad person, right? But I think it just. Because I feel like the trope of bringing bad guy back because bad guy and then kill bad guy is like really
Nikolai's
boring.
right there. Nikolai's right there.
Right, yeah.
Drinking with his money.
You can't make a better bad guy than Nikolai. Nikolai is by far and away the best. He just is.
Yeah, no, I can't. I think the thing is they've already killed bad guy in Wesker. He literally died in a volcano. Like you've given him the biggest send off. The main problem with Capcom right now...
2 rockets to the head and a volcano is walking that off.
The main problem with Capcom right now is that they're really bad at making villains. Right?
Well,
and keeping up with
alive.
them. Right? It's like Miranda was a great villain, right? And I loved Miranda, right? But she died, and she'd lived for over 100 years. Like, and she
until she met Ethan Winters.
Exactly, like
her
she
nemesis.
And then we hear about the connections, and then that goes nowhere, and then it's just fobbed off in some side note. Like, that is something. I mean, you guys know when Resident Evil 7 came out, and then Village, and then I was so hyped for the connections, and the family. I was like, oh, this is much bigger than we imagined it to be, right? And if you could connect Wesker to the connections, but now
Well, I want to just say that Capcom needs to play into the fandom's obsession with Wesker and have a flunky in universe who's so obsessed with him, it makes his own knockoff clone. It's nothing like Wesker.
Yeah, I mean that'd be cool.
Daniel Fabrone.
But to answer the question, I think there's going to be Wesker clones, but I'm not going to be happy with it.
Unfortunately, my brain, you saying Matrix and you saying loads of clones of Wesker, in my brain now, the big burly brawls become Chris Redfield fighting off hundreds of Wesker clones. That's how Resident Evil 9 ends. He's fighting like hundreds of Weskers.
Your Chris Redfield's eternal torment is punching boulders for the rest of his unnatural life. Anyway.
It's just a Sisyphus.
With boulders. Has to punch it up a hill.
So, what changes do you think they'll make to the merchant in Resident Evil 4 Remake?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think the main change they will make is that I think they will have more involvement with the story. I think like the Duke did in Village, the Duke was the merchant, but there was backstory there. He fed parts of the story. I think the merchant in the original RE4 is just a functional merchant, and it's kind of odd. I think they'll keep the British accent. I think there'll be kind of like a riot if that doesn't happen. It sounds silly, but I think they will keep that. The Duke is actually, if someone had a year before Village had come out, or long before Village had come out, and said this is going to be the Duke in a future game, you kind of think it was silly out of context. In context, I think he works great. So the RE4 merchant, they'll be more involved in the story and probably have some kind of fun connection to the Duke as well. So I think I'll put more time into it rather than just this game mechanic that he is in RE4.
Like a lot of things in RE4, like
they don't really have much depth.
That's all they were.
I think that every single Resident Evil meme that has come and been for 4 will be referenced in some way. I can see the merchant being the meme line delivery system, taking every mechanic from Village. So he's like the winking in joke of the entire game. Even you don't do suplex anymore, Leon. That stuff. I don't see him being a part of the game, as in narratively, but I do see him being a big walking tentpole reference. Master unlocking, eh? Yeah, I hope they get Paul Mercier back. I know.
I would love that.
I know Nick is likely doing Leon. I don't know if it's been confirmed, but it kind of like if he isn't, it sounded like. But I really hope Paul Mercier is still the merchant, because there is just something about that man's delivery of stranger that I just can't let go. So that's my 2 predictions. He's going to be a walking meme, and he's going to be Paul Mercier still.
I mean, I can't say anything serious, but I do fondly hope that they reveal the merchant to be who he always has been, and is Jason Statham. At some point, like right about the end, like Jason Statham just busts out, gets on the bike, and that's how you escape, because Jason Statham is going to get you out of where you're going without ever telling you what his actual name is in his movies, because it doesn't matter. It's always Jason Statham.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what we need, a Resident Evil, mechanic crossover. That's clearly what needs to have happened. No, in all seriousness, I mean, the only thing I'd like to see is, and they may well touch this if they have him as more involved character, you don't just leave him on the island at the end. You actually get away with the merchant.
I want to see him on the jet ski.
Well, no, that's the thing. Like,
flapping in the waves.
You can very easily see at the end of the game Leon saying, "Okay, hello, stranger merchant," who presumably, let's do this properly. Hey, Jason Statham. you take Ashley and get out of here. I'll catch up with you, and while I go and defeat the boss. That's all it would need for me. A tiny little bit. Just make it so there's some acknowledgement. I'm not leaving this poor guy to die on the island when it blows up and all the other stuff.
I think we'll definitely get that. I think it's going to be more involved. The merchant basically rescues you at the end of Village. I think we're going to have a retread of that same sort of stuff in RE4. I don't
know if you'll get that, but my thought might be that he might get some backstory at least, like who he was as part of the Village and stuff like that. But I don't know if. I think they'll probably just be like, oh well, he's a functional gameplay piece. He could be part of the story. They'll leave it mostly the same.
Yeah, it's awkward, isn't it? Because you couldn't have the merchant as a character where you could meet the merchant's the only one who's actually sane out of all these people, and is like, I don't know what happened to everybody else. We need to get out of here. It's you and me now. But I'll only sell you things.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I'm not taking the fight to him. You do it for me.
Yeah.
Do you know what'd be really dope is if
he is the Duke.
I mean, I've already said several times I think RE4 is going to connect a lot of the later games. But one thing that'd be really dope is if you do a side mission with him, and then thanks to that side mission is the reason why he will sell equipment to you.
That'd be cool.
And at the same time, it'd be really cool if he can give you little hints to all the valuables in the game. Because he knows what these valuables are and how much they're worth, right? So it'd be cool if he gave you a little bit of information about the valuables, or gave you winks about where they are, and little stories about them maybe. Because those valuables are so a lot of people put a lot of time into making those valuables in the original game. They look great. So yeah, it would be cool if we could get that. Everything else everybody else has said, given better characterization. I mean, he is one of our favourites, but again, it doesn't have much substance to him.
You could do a really awesome thing with him by making him an unreliable narrator, and then have introduce him. I mean, he could be a long-standing character at that point.
Yeah,
you can introduce him as a character where he tells you information you're never quite sure whether he's telling you the right thing, sort of stuff, or I'll sell you this thing, or this thing's worth this much. Is it really? Like that sort of stuff. But the sad reality of it is, knowing that this is something where an external studio have spent a lot of time putting the game together. I don't know that Capcom will have given the creative license to do that in a more long-standing way that goes outside of the rest of the game series. So I think anything with the merchant will be self-contained within RE4. I don't think, based on that, I don't think we'll ever see him step outside of that. Because as much as Capcom may be happy to say, "Hey, go make this game for us," they're not going to say, "Go make this game for us, and we're going to also make some characters that we can then use in our later games that we make." So
I think also he works great in Resident Evil 4. Doesn't mean he works great in every other context.
Yeah. I could happily see a spin-off game where you're just the merchant doing your own thing.
It'll probably be unlockable in the Mercenaries.
Literally kicks in the door, bunches of always welcome.
To hell.
It's just that. Literally, just only has his own lines.
Okay.
Literally, zombie turns up. What are you buying? Bam. Head explodes. Sort of stuff.
Someone asks, has involvement in the podcast given any of you an improved articulation in discussing or explaining your thoughts and opinions that you didn't feel was there before? Has anyone on the crew inspired you along these lines?
Yeah, I think 100%. What's funny for me is, back at college and uni, I was constantly surrounded by fellow film buffs and like when I was doing film studies and stuff, and it was all we talked about, and I loved doing it, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever really done that with people. And then when that kind of split apart, that sort of left me, and then it wasn't really until I came back to doing stuff for First Aid Spray that I've got the opportunity to, as in-depth as we go, because we're known for going like super in-depth.
Yeah, the thing where it's like, put aside an hour and a half for the podcast. No, it's a bit more
and I think it's something we do really well, and everybody inspires me. I think when we do those big episodes, I come away from it thinking everybody's like brought their A game, like, and we've done some really good stuff. And I don't try to wing it. I try to make sure I'm thinking about what I say, and I can often have trouble articulating to get my point across, but these podcasts are one of my favourite opportunities to do that. So it definitely it's all practice in just in critical thinking, just thinking in depthly about it at all with the games or the movies that we talk about. So 100%, it's one of my favourite things we do. I talk with other friends and family about movies and games, but it's not at the same level we do. That's what's brought us all together, and that's the shared thing we have. So I can make a reference or a point about something, and I know that generally everybody's going to understand what I'm talking about. So it's nice to know that we can do that, and I really enjoy it. And always striving to be as good as we can with what we do for that.
Well, I just feel like a yob.
I was going to say, get the fish ready.
Oh dear. No, I do try and research and study, and like Sai always do due diligence, and gives like show notes of here's the itinerary for what we're going to be talking about on the podcast. A bit behind the scenes or inside baseball maybe, but and then I just try and process my thoughts and figure out what I want to say. No one comes across as a horrible stream of consciousness. There is actually thoughts. But 9 times out of 10 it's oh yeah, Leon did it. But I like to think that in any case I lighten the mood.
I think at some point across doing all these podcasts, every single member of the panel has said something where afterwards I've come away and just gone, it's either changed my perspective or something I hadn't thought about. Everybody has had that turn for me. I think everybody has brought something at some point.
Except for Steve.
No, Steve. Including you have a very good track record of it, and I think for good reason. So
yeah, 100% record, Steve.
Well, this isn't the Praise Me podcast. Honestly, from my perspective, I have to go from whatever you guys say. I will always be here and do my best possible thing, but I also know I come across as a complete ass clown. Not intentionally.
Steve won't believe that he's the favourite. He's the popular one.
Yeah,
so
no, the real favourite.
I'm just Steve. I'm like mould. You can't get
Steve
rid of me.
I think so. I'll start with the thing. The one of us who impresses me the most, no offence to any of you guys, isn't here with us, which is Jordan.
I was going to say the same
thing. The way that Jordan approaches things and thinks things through. Yeah, it's very characteristic of the bot that he is. His algorithms are very well defined.
He's a robot squirrel now?
Yeah, he's a robot. He's he's Skynet squirrel. Jordan serial net. Amazing. Jordan has a way of approaching things which is very considered, and you can tell Jordan's very much a deep thinker, and that impresses me absolutely.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Kelsey. Everybody on the panel I've talked to has a way of articulating their thoughts and so on, which really makes me approach things in a sort of different perspective post recording.
Yeah.
I mean, unlike you guys, I prefer always to shoot from the hip on these things, mostly because I find the iterative process and the creative process and discussion points much better if it's organic, as in I just literally approach it with bam, let's go. And go from there. And I think a lot of conversations is bouncing off of each other, working out different bits and pieces, and then going from there. And I think that's very important from my process. But what I think is all of these conversations we have are collaborative, and all of them are us discussing our thoughts and back and forth and so on. And what I think is really nice is, just going back to the original question of have we improved, The answer absolutely is yes. I don't necessarily know in articulation, although that undoubtedly has improved. I think it's more so much something where, as a group, I think that we've become much better at having a conversation where we're more familiar with ourselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And not just in a, we know that Sean will like something because it's retro and crap, and Steve will agree with him, sort of thing. It's more so much we have different ways of approaching things, and when we suggest something, we have more of an understanding, that's interesting, I can approach this, and we bounce off each other better. And I think that's a key thing, and that's why I think people like our show. All of the best podcasts I listen to is where you basically have people who are clearly friends and passionate about that thing talking about it, and it's like sitting in a room with your friends having that conversation. I think that's what we do quite well and have got better at doing.
And don't always agree. There's plenty of times we don't agree.
I don't agree.
We don't agree with 90 of the stuff. With 90%
I can just about get as far as RE4. I don't believe there are any RE games after. I'll grudgingly give you RE4.
I think the big thing about us as a podcast is that we recognize these are games, or we recognize these are films. We recognize these
They're all films.
all that TV series. They are only games. And they are only films, and they're only TV series. And it's something that we could just talk about. And the fandom is wild because I think a lot of folks lose that perspective a lot of the time. So it's like, but we all respect that, and we respect each other's opinions because our opinions are not going to change the world, in terms of what our opinions are about Pokemon or
Let's talk about that more.
So it's not it's not important, but at the same time we're bringing people entertainment, and
it's fun, that balance between being professional, courteous, having fun, and not taking it too seriously.
Yeah.
It's funny, actually, because... Sorry, James.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's funny to say about Jordan is... I really wanted to ask him if he was going to be here. I was going to be like, so I want to see your notes, because especially early days of the podcast, it sounds like a dig, but it's not. If I knew Jordan was going to be on, I was like, that's going to go a little bit longer. So I throw it to Jordan. He just goes, and I don't know if he's scripting out everything he's going to say, or if he just fires from the hip. What level is there? It sounds like a well-rehearsed monologue sometimes, and it may be. I imagine it's probably not.
No,
he's just very good at
Judging from performances and recordings on Memory Card Lane, Jordan is a very ordered individual, and I think they have a lot of script and preparation, vastly to counterbalance.
And that's fine.
Sherwin's chaos bringing in mine middle of the road.
This is the Jordan Appreciation Podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we went to shout the guy out, it's not here.
The point you're making, scripted or otherwise, I mean, it's still his thoughts, and what he's come up with is generally, like you say. Oh no,
exactly. It doesn't matter one way or the other. Either way, it's impressive. Yeah. So and the other thing I was going to say, sort of in terms of myself, is weirdly, it's not so much an improvement; it's more like an adjustment, because for a long time I just did my own thing by me. Like my YouTube stuff, it was like I would play the game, write about it, do the voiceover, do the edit. That was it. And sort of getting into one of the concerns, getting to first stage where it's like, oh God, I've got to work with other people, and you've got to work with other people's schedules, and it's always complicated, and it's stuff like that. But for first stage, I can kind of back off a little bit, because I know I can say to you guys, I don't have a whole lot this week for this one, but that's fine, because everyone else will say a bunch of stuff, and Sherwin, like you say, that might inspire something in me. I was like, I hadn't thought about that. Yes, here's something bouncing off from that. So it's a different thing, certainly.
Yeah, I've heard you say that a few times. I think you'll go into something expecting one thing, and I didn't have many notes because I don't care, and then somebody says something, you're actually going to just spike. That happens to me a lot.
There are definitely podcasts where I've gone and be like, I'm going to be the moany one. And by the end, everyone's kind of changed my sort of tune on it. And I'm like, do you know what? Yeah, fair enough.
I've learned a lot. I feel like playing with you guys now, podcasting with you folks. We'll be playing later, but it's. I think the big thing that, and I've brought it into other things as well. Like the big thing is I'm kind of like shown in the way of from the hip, but I also have to take notes. But the way I brainstorm is by listing things, right? I don't write paragraphs down. I write a word, right? Or like a couple words, and I'll be like,
word association.
And then it'll trigger something off in my brain. And the thing is First Aid Spray that has improved that, because it used to be it used to be really bad and really rudimentary, but it's actually translated into Mortal Deeds as well, and my D&D thing, and like being a better DM as well, because note taking is important. And my opinion has changed of things as well. Like I remember that we had this was about a year and a half ago. We had a discussion in the Discord about spoilers and things and what we should and shouldn't show. Oh yeah, it was when it was about 8 months before Welcome to Raccoon City came out, because I knew a friend who had got behind the scenes pictures of the Welcome to Raccoon City set, and they were sharing them with me. And like I was itching. I was like, we need to get these. Everyone needs to see these. But at the same time, like Sai, you explained to me that because at the time I was just like, people need to see these. They're really cool. But you were like, no, because that's spoilers, and also it's not the end product, so we don't know if it's going to be like that, and it might be a really bad. It might have really bad concussion. Repercussions from it. Sorry, I'm tired, everybody. And that made me change. That conversation made me change my opinion on just spoilers in general and leaks. And slowly I started to realize, that no, they're really bad.
Well, it's the other perspective. Like, say, you get caught up in stuff, and you mentioned the wildness of the fandom. That's what it is. I think doing stuff like this helps you rather than just.
The thing is, do you know the other thing is that like I started to introspect a little bit, and I was like, what if this happened to Alien? And you know how much I care about that franchise. Like, what?
Not fair.
Yeah. What if that happened to Alien, and like somebody shared behind the scenes stuff for. Don't worry, the fairies have just arrived to greet Sai.
Cool.
It's that's something big I've learned, and also calming down a little bit. I used to be very hyperactive on podcasts and stuff, and sometimes that can be good, but sometimes I can get a little bit too hyperactive, and I've learned to kind of reel myself in. And in terms of who inspires me, I mean, everybody has, as Kel said earlier
at some point,
everybody has inspired me in some way.
Yeah.
Like from, I'm always blown away by people's opinions every time we have a podcast. That comes with just a mutual respect for each other as well.
Speaking about being blown away by opinions, let's get spicy. What do you consider your hottest Resident Evil / survival horror hot take? I'm going to go first. Mine's simple, and I don't know. I don't listen back to things we do, but I don't feel like I went as full in as I should have done on a particular profile episode about my personal feelings on a certain character. I think not only is Ada Wong the worst character in Resident Evil history, she is right up there as one of the worst characters in history, full stop. Because everyone goes on about, imagine if they put Alice in the game. She's like, I'm sorry, they already did from 2004 onwards. She's basically the same character. She's the Mary Sue, turns up, thinks she's mysterious, kills a bunch of stuff, and then disappears again ad nauseum, to the point where later appearances, she adds absolutely nothing. I remember in the podcast we talked about It's Damnation she showed up in. She has no reason to be there. She does absolutely nothing. It's infuriating. She doesn't add anything to Resident Evil except she saves Leon. Okay, cool. It's very tired at this point.
I'm super secret.
Yeah,
She had more depth in 6, and that was it. And that was because the villain was obsessed with her.
That's the thing. I think that's why the podcast went a little bit up, because we got to talk about 6. And 6, there is more to it. Even by 4, I was like, okay, she's alive, apparently, for some reason. Nobody really reacts that strongly to it. I mean, and she doesn't really do anything. We still don't know really what she's up to. And the thing is, neither do Capcom. They don't have a plan. Why should I care? I'm sorry, but no, I know the stands are going to come
when you release the DLC about one character, but literally don't explain any more about the character, like it's a bad time.
It says a lot, doesn't it? That one tease from Village has got people chomping at the bit, and what's Ada going to do? Just show up, be mysterious, and off, like size.
Yes, pretty much. Everyone's upset that she got cut from the game. I'm kind of like, yeah.
We would have got more of nothing.
Exactly.
She's Miranda's daughter. That ruins everything.
Would you say no to any further categorization of Ada? Well, any.
I say
Well, you're going to get some. I mean, she's going to be in remake 4, so
yeah, maybe they'll do.
Is.
No, I would like them to do something with
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
Like you make a joke about Miranda's daughter. I'll take that. It's better than nothing. I will take anything. Just give us something other than her entire trope is you don't know anything about me. That's her entire personality. That's not interesting.
It's like the dark mysterious man trope, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's like I hate that too. Like it's like
Yeah. No thanks. Anyway, someone take the heat off me.
So this might be spicy, it might not, but I cannot think of another franchise outside of Resident Evil. I think Resident Evil is the most confused franchise of anything I enjoy. I can't think of a mess. I think there's more bad Resident Evil than there is good Resident Evil. Ooh. And it blows my mind because I love it so much. But then if you take a step back and you look at it, in my honest opinion, there's more bad than good. It, at multiple points during its lifespan, doesn't really know what it's catering for, and I think it's been trying to sort of find that for a long time. And I don't want to go as far as saying that they just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, but sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes it feels that even within one game, it's two different types of games, and that's, even with the most recent game with Village, you could say that's like two different types of games. And so lots of people are very protective about Resident Evil. I'm not protective about it because I'm very happy to admit it's one of the messiest franchises in terms of not just story and canon, but gameplay, and who it's for, and whether that's to its strength, I don't know, because it's still around. And
it's why. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine.
It's why it's lasted so long, because the fans are so passionate about it.
But then I think of something like, I think of other franchises that have spanned the same sort of lifespan. Okay, let's talk about Metal Gear again. I mean, there's not as many games, of course. Those games are kind of different, but the same sort of threads have remained. But with Resident Evil, there's so many different games that are at opposite ends of the spectrum for me. And I love the franchise. I love the franchise. It's also kind of weirdly one of the worst franchises because it had the coherence that it lacks. And I've got a lot of love for a lot of Resident Evil, and then stuff that I don't like, and I just wish that there could be some more coherence. So we talked about the book stuff earlier, and there seems to be a weird balance of power with Resident Evil, and I don't know what's going on. So I think it's more bad than good, as opposed to sum up.
Steve.
Well, mine's twofold really, in that people need to start dying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like actually
Correct.
dying, like having some stakes, and
There's so much plot armor.
Yeah.
In the Resident Evil right now.
And to touch a bit onto what Kelsey said, I feel like that Capcom need to actually go a bit out of their comfort zone, because going further and further into the action adventure genre, I say that with pain, and it's just basically it's another over the shoulder shooter with survival horror mechanics. There are other avenues to pull on. I mean, RE7 proved that. There are other horror genres you can lean on too. There's even older ones you could go back to. And I'm not going to be one of these people who goes, we just want to take the camera angles back. But there is plenty of room to do a small spin-off title that is just like the old games for the old people. I'm not saying that I just want it like it was back in the old day, but sometimes you want to put a Beatles album on. You don't want to always listen to the new hot stuff that's all the same. Just coming from the guy who's not a Beatles fan in the room, which is ironic. But the thing is, my hot take is that Capcom need to stop being so homogenous with keeping the same characters alive and making the same type of game over and again. Now, I like Resident Evil, don't get me wrong, but stuff, variety, and yes, some of it won't be good, some of it will be bad. Still give it a fair shake either way. Is that okay?
They definitely need to start killing people. It's going to get nonsensical at some point.
And I don't mean new guy who showed up last week.
Oh yeah,
like Ethan.
Stop introducing characters and killing them.
I understand Ethan needs to Ethan's death, but I'm not saying kill him off screen. like we all like grimace at the thought of Wesker coming back, but Wesker versus Chris, and they both go out ungracefully and violently, permanently, would be a great shout for both of them.
Yeah, agreed.
Leon, of course, motorcycle accident, probably.
Off screen.
Yeah, the guy looks at a car the wrong way, it explodes.
Fine by me.
And then Jill lives forever.
Yeah. She to the age of 99, and she dies peacefully in her sleep. Like everyone goes.
Yeah. Miss you.
It's tough because everything you guys have said, I actually agree with all of it. I think for me it's interesting as a person who really enjoyed the original series of games when they came out, and has increasingly found themselves actually quite alienated by newer releases. This is a difficult one because truthfully I have literally zero interest in playing Resident Evil 7 or 8. I've never played them. I probably will at some point, but I have so little interest in them because to me they're just not a Resident Evil game. And I don't say that from it's not another old greybeard saying oh god they're not Resident Evil, but they're really not. Like just seeing a little bit of Resident Evil 8's gameplay footage last night, for example, was the first time I've ever seen it actually running. And my first thought was, this isn't a Resident Evil game. It literally wasn't. Like, okay, fair enough, you've evolved somewhere else. And that's not from a petulant kind of Resident Evil needs to remain the way it was game perspective, because it doesn't. Everything evolves, everything changes. I feel that the true issue with this is that exactly what you were saying, Kelsey. Resident Evil is something where, like for me, they've never defined the rules very well.
No,
they've like it's something where part of the appeal of the original games was seeing this thing, and there's part of it where you kind of go, okay, foot in reality, this could actually happen or something. Obviously it's an extension of that, but this could be a thing. That's pretty scary in itself. And you hear stories about, for example, really good example actually that I always land on with the tyrants. I'm good with the idea that the tyrants come because you're abducting people from prisons or homeless people or whatever, experimenting on them. Most of them don't survive because of the horrible state their body's probably already in anyway, but also because it's a horrific process that will probably most likely kill you. But if you do make it through, your reward is you get to be this tyrant, right? And that's a very dubious reward. But the point is that's you. Getting to the stage, like in later games, where actually they're all clones of one guy who actually has been from the Russian military that they've been cloning since in secret technology since the 60s and done all this other crazy stuff too, because the rejection rate for a tyrant is actually 1 every 5 billion people or whatever else. That's the bit where you're like, okay, you're so far removed from reality, I just don't care anymore. And I think that's a point for me where it does feel a lot like Resident Evil was just expand. This isn't a hot take. This is just someone voicing something that I think a lot of people feel. But it's something where Resident Evil was just expanded in a very uncontrolled, very directionless, very massive way. I'm echoing what you're saying. Like it's something where there's no one ever sat there and gone, right, okay, here's our Resident Evil Bible. This is what the world looks like. This is how it works. If we want to do this thing, we can't do this thing because of X, Y, Z. Yeah, and that's fine. Like I think, much like I always tend to look at Resident Evil these days as from a perspective of it's almost like a Marvel movie, like Marvel character sort of thing. Like everything is multiverses, everything is different perspectives. Like and any of those things could be Resident Evil. It doesn't have to be the way I understood Resident Evil back in the day. That's a very different Resident Evil to what people understand Resident Evil as now. So I guess here's the hot take, if I have to have one. I think for many reasons, as much as Resident Evil 4 was a release which was a really, really solid game, having replayed it again recently, it really was. And I think it hit a bit of friction a bit of turbulence on the way in because it's not a Resident Evil game in terms of what it was. They obviously slapped a skin over it and made it Resident Evil. But I think my take is Resident Evil 4, as much as it was a really solid game, got a lot of eyes on the product, got a lot of people into it, was a misstep in terms of the Resident Evil history, because if you see everything that came out of the redefinition of Resident Evil as a result of that game, the games that followed have proven not to be very 5 and 6 were not classics, for example. If you look at the way the direction of the thing goes in terms of just absolving a lot of science and everything else in it, if you look at a whole bunch of other stuff, I think that's the starting point where Resident Evil goes and just really starts to jump the shark, disconnects, whatever else, starts to lose its way from its roots. And that for me is the point where that's the starting point for when it kind of, if you were to look at something and go, that's when the addiction began. That's the bit where the band started releasing bad CDs, and it kind of started going from there.
It's been fighting with itself ever since.
Until that point, it felt like there was at least this concise control over what was going on.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think, even though it came out with some games and there's different bits and pieces, that's the bit for me where the chaos really began. And
do we think that that's because it's maybe bigger than Capcom were even able to handle or anticipate?
I think a lot
they were stuck then with this huge thing.
I don't necessarily know that. I think what it is that much like a lot of things, you see this quite a lot with some stories and some things. Controlling something when it's very small and you've got an isolated event or an isolated location or an isolated bunch of characters is pretty straightforward, and you can create some really interesting interactions. Exploding that up to a global scale is where it goes wrong, and that's what I think happened. Like, we had this idea of what Raccoon City looked like. We had this idea of what this outbreak looks like. We have understanding of how that self-contained event happens. We have no idea the ramifications going on to what happens later on in the world, and unfortunately, that can vary differently. And no one ever sat down and went, right, okay, what does the world look like? Let's make a Bible. Let's make a thing. Post Umbrella, post Raccoon City outbreak, what happens next in the timeline? What happens here and here? And so everyone just goes, cool, let's do this thing. Okay, so Spain, doesn't look like Spain to me, but it's Spain now, and that's what happens. This is Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 5, this is what it looks like in Africa. And grab these different ideas from wherever.
There's definitely been a trend of that, of those reference points are not necessarily landed as intended.
And there's no connection to an overall bigger picture. All it does is just grabs bits and pieces here and there and just kind of doesn't even try to tie them in, just makes this nonsense.
Put it there just to be different. Let's put it over there.
It convolutes its own story when it does that, because nothing makes sense.
Yeah. And the sad reality was, like, even when you then go back to that later on, like Resident Evil 0, it just throws it up. Like, Resident Evil 0 is that fortunately rare example of something which is a prequel, which creates, rather than closing off story arcs, just opens them up in random directions and makes really confusing contradictory statements.
So I'm actually putting like a review together for Umbrella Chronicles at the moment, and I've written nearly that exact same thing about Resident Evil 0, because obviously it retreads some of the game. Sure. Yeah, it's a great point.
Anyway, so that's me. No hot takes, just reaffirming my stand.
We've heard it all before, Sherwin.
You guys have said a lot of points I had in my head, but I think kind of a big one, and I've touched on it earlier on, but people should stop clutching their pearls about this franchise.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, you are damaging the franchise the more you want, like, it to not so much for things to stay as they are, or to keep your fixed camera angles, or to whatever, or to keep your character alive. It's just like, you doing this as a consumer, and I've caught flack for this on the Fast Discord, but you as a consumer saying you don't want this and you don't want that, right, is scaring Capcom, right, from actually
being bold.
Exactly, yeah. Like, you see these other, like, franchises who are like that. They will kill. Like, those are the big moments in games, because it's like, I can't believe they die. Like, I mean, think about House of the Dragon, or Game of Thrones, or whatever. People are talking about the Red Wedding, right? They're talking about the Battle of the Bastards. They're talking about, like, all these things, right? But Resident Evil, like, in my head, like, if I go,
hasn't had that moment, because they're scared.
Like, the only moment we've had is from the original games.
Sure.
Like, and then they went, actually, no, like, that's not how it's going to be. We're now going to fry him in a volcano, but wait, he still might not be dead, which is why, like, the Megamycete, I think, is so cool, like, cool of a monster. right? I've discussed this before, but like because it keeps memories and stores them, and like I was going to say earlier on, I forgot because tired brain, but like Wesker could also be a memory inside this Mega Mycete at some point. It's been here for a very long time.
At age 17, Spencer wheeled him over and touched it, and therefore his entire mind from 17 became the Mega Mycete.
Sure. Yeah, like I just just stop taking it. If you listen to us as a podcast, you will. I know I don't want to sound egotistical, but I think if you listen to our podcast, like legitimately and genuinely, and listen to us, like you would probably have like the kind of similar viewpoint that we just want more content, and we want more content. We want it to be good content, and we want Capcom to push and be. I feel like 7 and 8 were a good push, right? But it wasn't enough. So they need to push. They need to kill Chris, and they need to.
Well, I was going to say I would love to see what would happen if Capcom were bold enough to be like, yes, Resident Evil is a multiverse story.
Yeah,
that's it. For them to be like, yes, everything is canon because this is now a multiverse story, and we're going to acknowledge it. I would love to see how people react to that because it would change everything.
Yeah. So if Leon kills Ganon in Ocarina of Time,
it makes the three. Yeah, that's right.
I would go with one thing. I don't necessarily know that they need to do that as such as in a way. I think what Resident Evil is missing is a definition of like I can happily believe Resident Evil can be all of the things we're talking about. I feel like Resident Evil should be something where Capcom can literally go, this is the Resident Evil Raccoon City universe. This is the Resident Evil kind of
bio worldwide
universe, and don't have those connected. And that's the key point. At that point, you can then announce releases. This is Resident Evil 9. Resident Evil 9 is set in the Resident Evil Ethan universe. Doesn't have to have any connections to any of the other games other than the ones within that little bubble. Doesn't and at that point people know exactly what they're buying into. You can start to establish what the key DNA of what each of those different series is. You can then, as a player of the game, you can go, right, okay, so this game's going to be about XYZ, and I'm into that, and that's great. Here's Resident Evil OG universe thing. Okay, cool. So it's going to tap into this stuff. I'm really excited about this. Can't wait to see how they expand out that, because that actually gives you capacity to then take Chris and have a different Chris here than you have in here and here. Why the hell we all talk about Chris when he's boring? Is another question entirely. We should be talking about Leon clearly, but no. The point is that you can take those characters and go different directions with them and do different stuff, and they don't have to impact each other. Half of the reason why Resident Evil is so convoluted is because here's Wesker. Well, Wesker started here. At some point he was doing this thing, and now he's doing this thing. Who knows where he is? Will Wesker come back? Will Wesker do this? Will Wesker do that? It's because you're trying to tie so many very disparate things together that it's impossible.
So one thing that I again making references to Alien again, right? And I've spoken about it a lot in the server again, right? But the Alien franchise does that, right? Because Alien is different from Alien vs Predator. It's different from Predator. Yeah, like they're all three different timelines, right? And even Alien of the early '90s comics, etc., right, can be forgotten about. Other than some things that we were discussing earlier on with short stories and things that just have no consequence, really, right? But they've been really like taken into account, like the cinematic universe, and also from the last 10 years, that's Alien, right? And here's Alien vs Predator, and they've been releasing like Rift War, the novel for that, and they're all different universes. And maybe one day they'll try and connect those things. I think it'll be a disaster, right? But if they did that for Resident Evil as well,
it helps create definition. It helps to actually give people an idea of.
And people aren't stupid.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I mean, well, when it comes to story writing, it's like we just want a good story. We just want to be entertained, right? And if you can't understand what's going on in the story, then you can't be entertained.
I mean, you take the recent Netflix show as an example. For some reason, we can acknowledge that S.D. Perry's novels are an alternate universe. We can acknowledge that the Juanison films are an alternate universe. But people are really uppity about the Netflix series because it doesn't follow canon.
What they said, I think, is the main thing, isn't it?
Again, I don't know where that line comes from, like, because Capcom themselves for a long time have been like, just adverse to talking about what isn't.
I think because they know
what's canon.
They know it's a mess.
Well, sure, exactly. Like, and that's why people get into debates about the remakes and stuff. And it's the same with the show. Is like they seem to have a line on this is canon. Where did that come from? Did Capcom say anything? Is it just something that Constantine were like, no, we're going to say that it's canon because it'll
get people to bombs on seats.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's a shame because you could. At core level, you could just Final Fantasy it. Every game is its own thing, doesn't necessarily tie into each other. Like, in every game there's a Cid. Does that mean that we then have endless conversations about how one Cid is related to the other? No, because it's not important.
Yeah.
I do wonder,
every game could have a Wesker.
I do wonder if Capcom are subtly trying to do that, because technically 7 and 8 aren't called 7 and 8. It's like, alright, I know 7 has the logo thing, and I think with Village, they specifically went out of the way to say, don't call this Resident Evil 8.
Yeah, don't call it Resident Evil 8. So it's like, it is the 8th game, but it's not called Resident Evil 8.
So
they were
maybe
really
they
hard on
are
that
very aware, and they're like, no, this is our separate little thing over
and maybe
here.
that's the thing. Yeah. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
The REGU.
Regu.
Let's end on something a bit more positive then.
I don't know, we were pretty positive.
Oh yes, this is true. Came with the standard first aid spray polite conversation. After I went, burn Ada Wong at the stake.
We had to steer back. You are pretty negative.
So, what is one gaming element from the Resident Evil series that always draws you back in and gives you the warm, fuzzy feelings? From Luigi, 32 and a half years old.
Thanks, Lou. I hope you're having a good day.
I would say, I think there's quite a few, but I'd keep it simple. I think the piano and Moonlight Sonata is something that I've said before. When I think of Resident Evil, generally that's the first thing that pops into my head. If it's not the first thing, it's like the second thing that pops into my head. I think back to when I first experienced that, and it just has the same effect on me now as it does now. That always stops me in the moment. It's such an awesome little part of the game. It's so simple, like it's such a simple little puzzle. I think to hear that piece of music in the game is like just fits so perfectly well. I'm glad they kept it as part of the remake. I always get fuzzy feelings thinking about that. It's one of my favourite moments in the entire franchise, and like RE1's not even my favourite game in the franchise, but that moment is Resident Evil 1 right there. I love that moment.
I think for me, it's interconnected maps that really look back on themselves, become an expanding labyrinth complex, maybe themed keys, but it's that kind of like an environment you get to know and then get surprised by over and over again. That's what I really, really dig about it.
That's good, Steve. So for me, it's
finding it real hard.
So for me, it's isolationism. Every single Resident Evil game, when it's doing it well, you feel like you are alone. You feel like you are literally. It's that sense of. You don't realise you're doing it. I realised this playing Remake 2 and why it was that the alligator section sucked in that. It's because, for me anyway, I'm speaking from my own perspective, but the reason why it sucks it's because you don't realise you are locked in this struggle for survival that you're currently going through. That you're literally blasting through and you're holding your breath and you're like, how do I get from this? Like, I'm completely surrounded by enemies. Where are they? I am completely alone. And there's one or two things happens. One, I didn't realise the reason the alligator section sucks is because when I died, I kind of almost like released my breath. Okay, I spent so much time trying to stay alive. I'm knocked out of this. And the reason why it sucked is because I'm literally playing it and going, I died. And it completely broke that immersion for me completely, which is why it sucked. But it's that sense of I'm going through, I'm all alone, I don't know where anything is. There's this almost sense of determinism that bleeds into you, which is amazing. And it also lends the cutscenes where you find another survivor so much weight. Like, you literally go into that room, that music starts, you have a cutscene, whatever game you're playing, and even if it's Sherry and she's practically useless, and you're like, someone else, I'm safe. And that's why also at the same time, when you get the two obvious breaks I could talk about, one is Kendo and his gunshot, where I'm in a cutscene, I'm safe, no I'm not. And also when you're in the save room in the clock tower and then Nemesis steps upstairs and the thing comes down, the music stops, that sort of stuff. At that point you're like, okay, like I'm not safe here, and that's that's a really cool. It gives them so many devices to be able to do something, but at core essence, that's Resident Evil for me.
Oh man.
Follow that.
It's a weird thing, Joe. I'll really give you a little bit more time to think, which is that's a weird place to get your warm and fuzzy feelings from. But then having gone with the whole Dino Crisis, I love this music, and so I was like, this is horrific.
Yeah.
So apparently I'm not good at measuring.
To be fair, like you guys between you have basically nicked mine as well, pretty much in the sense that it's like, exploring that unknown
Audience,
map. And,
just know we are the best. Go.
So I don't know either at this point, but
it's a unique experience, and I think like every single Resident Evil still has a recipe of what it was originally. Like in some capacity, like there's something that is still there that is still Resident Evil, even though the name makes no sense. Like the game, it still has like ingredients there that I enjoy. I don't know how they do it. And this isn't me saying, it's like a perfect, every game is perfect, because it's definitely not. If you listen to this whole podcast, you'd realize that.
Right, but rears its ugly.
But like, there is still something there that keeps you, whether it be the cheesiness, like of some of the stuff, or whether it be some of the, even though we know as like long-time Resident Evil fans, this person's probably going to come back anyway. Like even though some of the deaths, the weapons in the game, like I feel like that in the most recent ones, I've been really enjoying weaponry in the games as well. And like it's been really, really fun trying to figure out the lore. Right? It's almost impossible, right? But it's fun to put your tinfoil hat on and start talking about what could be, whether it be true or not. Like I was completely wrong about Chris. Even before that was released as him as the cover, I was saying that Chris was a werewolf, because I was like, look at the werewolf. He looks like Chris. Yeah. He's wearing his jacket. Even before that, and it was fun. And it was okay to be wrong about it, but it's fun to think about what could be in these series and I had no idea where Village was going.
Notorious leaker Moist Owlet says Chris is going to be a werewolf.
I think one of my tweets was, if Chris is not a werewolf, I'm gonna riot.
Well, they went out of their way to make it look that way.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of late. I don't think they purposely did it. I just think it was lazy marketing.
Yeah.
This looks cool. It means
look,
nothing.
we can fade two characters.
That's the most Resident Evil statement. This looks cool. It means nothing.
I think like a lot of folks said like kind of very similar things to what I was thinking, right? But sorry, my answer is half-assed, but it's a mixture of a whole bunch of little things.
For sure.
That bring it back, like a whole bunch of little features that bring me back to Resident Evil. In particular, Remake 3. The thing that brings me back to Remake 3 is everybody's hatred of it.
I actually quite like it.
It's good.
It's great.
I actually really do like Resident Evil Remake 3. It's a solid game.
Quick, fun.
Yeah, mine are similar. To be fair, like I could say, themed keys and the feeling of that's what this item is for, and like cool, I can go in here now. I don't want to. I'm sorry. All that stuff. But just as easy, I'll go an easy one. Also gives you the warm fuzzies about Resident Evil. Barry Burton.
That's absolutely 100%.
Yeah.
I can't, like, as much as you can talk about the voice acting in the original game, like just one man alone pretty much justifies the entire decision to do that.
That's enough to be like, I'm happy.
That man's insane, and so forth. Any of them you could pick.
Every single person loved Barry that played Resident Evil.
Yeah,
every person.
Nobody hates Barry.
Anybody who says, I hate Barry, they're just going for shock value.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't like Remake Barry, but then you played Revelations 2 and you liked Barry after that.
Oh, I love Barry after Rev 2, Like, because he was proper dad at that point.
This is RE1 Barry, not Remake 1 Barry.
Again, we got to see some origins about who a character was. Like, and what his stakes were.
Emotional insight.
I want to see more of that. Like, like, I don't care about Chris because he's got no stakes. I don't care really about Leon because he's got no stakes. Like, I care about Barry because he has a family. Yeah.
I have travelled the length of the planet and I've met an awful lot of Resident Evil fans and talked to them about why they love the game so much, and every single one of them has a Barry line.
Yeah.
Every single one of them has a Barry line and can tell you how much they love Barry and where they first saw Barry and their first meeting with Barry. He's literally like the most popular human being on the planet.
It's why one of the biggest fist pumping moments is the alternate ending to RE3 where he comes and rescues you, and everyone was like, and obviously the line delivery is terrible,
it's
but
so
it's
funny.
You're the person.
Yeah, like objectively, that ending is so tacked on and fan servicey. There's no mention of Barry at all in that game. Yet everyone goes, that's the ending.
Yeah.
That's the canon ending. That's the one I like. So they go, it's the ending. So yeah.
Yep. Is it you? Yeah. That's it. Doesn't go, hey Jill, how's it going? Sorry about that. Yeah.
You don't even see his face, you just see that part.
A beard.
Yeah.
You see a beard and a hat.
Powerful.
No waving of Magnum going, it's me, check me out.
I mean, to the point where, like, having written, I mean, I guess it is fan fiction technically, but for the Kickstarter, like everyone's favourite moment is where Barry, whilst flying a helicopter one-handed, shoots the tyrant off the side of it with a magnum. Yeah, thus deafening everybody in the cockpit.
Doesn't matter.
Everyone's just like, I love Barry. At the end of that, like anyone else, you'd be like, mate, what is that? Barry, you're like, that's a pretty par for the course. Like, he's Barry.
You're right. Any game without Barry is bad.
I stand by the best Capcom game that they've never made is Barry and Mikhail, like, as buddy system. That'd be the game that everyone wants to see.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's called Broforce, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that wraps up this. I don't know how long we went for. Typical First Day Spray fashion. It was probably a number of hours.
Over 2 hours.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
How's that for a bonus episode?
Could be part 1 and part 2.
Yeah, we'll record the rest later. Apologies to anyone whose question didn't make it. Obviously, we can only do so much. We did go quite long. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for supporting us for what will be 4 years when this comes out. But it's a little bit of ways off now.
4 more years.
Exactly, yeah. And then the rest.
Barry for president.
Thank you to all our patrons as usual. This in-person meetup, I don't say it wouldn't have happened without them. It was a lot easier with, let's put it that way. So there you go. Other than that, I guess I got nothing else to say other than have a good week.
Have a good week.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Anyway, let's talk about random
Positive stuff, right.
always
Are you
positive.
good? Are we recording?
Mine's already
Yeah.
going, so
Fantastic.
Yeah.
don't worry.
Recording.
Save that away.
Let's save that away for black market.
Yeah, basically.